Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm one of your co-hosts, Rico Borrego,
I am your other co-host, Tony Borrego.
and this is the podcast known as Relatively Sound, the podcast from Mars. Today, we got a very special episode because back on the podcast, we have friend of the podcast, Chris Antonucci. Chris, how you doing today?
Hey, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. New
Even though it's
Year.
late, so I'm sorry, Larry David.
No, it's all good, but new year, new me, new us, and that comes into play today because today Tony and I are doing something we haven't really done before on the podcast, just once with our sister, which is talk about an album that neither of us have heard before. And Chris, you actually came up with the idea because you knew that when it comes to music, David Bowie is definitely in Tony and I's blind spot when it comes to music, when it comes to rock. And, you were like, hey, I love Bowie. Let me give you guys an album from him. We could talk about it on the podcast. So we did just that. You gave Tony and I Bowie's album, The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars.
Good, you said the whole thing.
Yeah. I had to pull up because I always forget the full title. It's maybe one of the longest album titles that I've heard. Now, Tony, I don't know if you want to talk really briefly about your lack of Bowie knowledge. It's probably similar to mine, which is, aside from some of his hits that I've heard on the radio, aside from maybe some covers I've heard other artists perform, I've never heard a full David Bowie album. And he's always been someone that I never put on my radar just because I never, the songs I heard like on the radio, like I guess never stood out to me, but knowing his importance, I never was like, oh, he's overrated. He's blah, blah, blah. I just was like, oh, he's not for me. But, immediately I never fully gave him a chance. So I don't know if your story is similar to that as well.
Yeah, I would say so. I definitely do know a handful of songs, and kind of like you said too, a lot of them being covers. And honestly, I don't really listen to that much, like UK rock and stuff. So I just don't think I was necessarily drawn to it, just kind of off like a surface level listen. But the more of his songs that I've heard, prior to this album, kind of the more I have had some interest. Especially I know that STP, one of my favorites, covered Andy Warhol. And
Interesting.
my friend also showed me some of his songs. Was I'm Afraid of Americans or something like that with with Trent Reznor in the video. That was exciting to see. So yeah.
Yeah, and I know one time I went and saw Glenn Hansard live, and I think I posted a picture of a set list, and Chris, you noticed he had covered a Bowie song, I think called Ashes to Ashes, something like that.
Oh yeah.
And
his album.
And when he started playing it, I knew it wasn't one of his originals, but I just was like, oh, I don't know the song. On the set list, he didn't put, who it was done by. So
Yeah.
again, I know like when he passed away, I know Bruce covered one of his songs. I can't remember which one.
Rebel.
Yeah, and I think Coldplay started playing his song Heroes live too in their set. So like a lot of people that I listened to were, covering him and giving nods to him when he passed away. So but why don't you tell us your brief background with Bowie and why you specifically gave us this album of his?
All right. Well, I should first start by saying that when I asked you guys about doing it today, I had forgotten or didn't realize that his birthday would have been on Monday the 8th. So it's like a Bowie tribute that we're doing.
Ah, okay, that's great.
All right. So my background, basically, like you guys, I had known some of the hits that I had heard, not much, but then probably 2013, I remember like the press was going crazy with the surprise release of like his first new song in 10 years. I think it was The Stars Are Out Tonight from his upcoming album the next day, which he hadn't, again, like it was completely surprising for like the music press and fans that Bowie was releasing new music, because he had basically retired after having like a heart attack while on his last tour in 2003. So he just like basically went quiet musically for a decade. So I had like heard like those rumblings and seen it, but didn't pay much attention. And then finally I just bought Ziggy Stardust, the CD, probably in 2014 or 2015, um, just to give it a listen. So I was like, so that's when it started for me. I think I bought that, and the other one at the time I had bought was Let's Dance, like his other most popular album because of MTV at the time. So then I knew those, listened to those, and but I didn't really start listening to more of his stuff until unfortunately after his death on 2 days after his birthday, January 10th, 2016. So that's basically when it started. And then that morning on my way to work, I put the CD in the car, and by the end of 5 years, I was crying. And I was crying over an artist whose music I barely knew at the time, but that just says a lot about the power of Bowie.
Oh yeah, no, I can respect that. The same thing happened to me when I got into the Tragically Hip, shortly after their frontman Gord passed away. It's like,
Yeah,
yeah, I don't even know half their music, but I can already just tell they're so powerful that yeah, it just moves you.
right. And I always felt that he was like one artist that I needed to listen to, but I just never got around to it. So then eventually, 2022, Adam and I did one of our listens was Bowie, and I just became obsessed with him. So, and it felt like I found a long lost friend that I was meant to be friends with. And, like he changed my perception and understanding of what it means to be an artist, where you don't just have to stick to one art form. And you could explore other art forms that can help inspire you in your main art form. And so Bowie, he was also an actor, a painter, sculptor, writer, dancer, fashion designer. He just did it all.
Yeah, no, that's super impressive. And I guess well, I guess it was a little surprising. It took you a little bit to get into him since, unlike Tony and I, Tony mentioned that we don't listen to a lot of UK rock where
Yeah.
your favorite band is the Beatles.
Hmm.
You like Elton John and artists like that. So
Hmm.
um, yeah, I would say the UK rock too is also kind of in my blind spot and certain genres too, like glam rock in general.
Yeah, no,
I
I could
know
see that.
Tony and I were talking. He kept mentioning T Rex and like even
Yep.
I know the name and Mott the Hoople. I know those names. I just don't really know much about. I think Tony probably knows more about them than I do.
Hmm.
Um, so what was this? Do you think this is the essential album for people who have never given him his discography a listen? Is this the album?
Oh yeah, this is like the perfect introduction to Bowie for anyone beginning their Bowie journey. It's like the one that made him a superstar. Because like there basically you could say like there was Bowie mania, how there was like, Beatle mania a decade before.
And Tony, were you? I mean, we'll probably save our thoughts as we're going through song for song, but did you have any like predictions on how you thought the album would sound or any hopes?
As far as predictions, well, I'll say this. The two songs I knew on this album prior to listening to it was Starman
Hmm.
and Hang On to Yourself.
Okay.
And the only reason I know Hang On to Yourself is I was watching this Reverb makes videos where they demo, pedals and stuff, and some dude is playing a
Right.
riff, and then I looked at the comments and they're like, "Oh, that's Hang On to Yourself." So I'm like, "Oh, that's cool. I'd love to see more of what he has to offer."
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then knowing Starman's on it, I was kind of expecting something almost kind of theatrical at times, which I
Uh-huh.
guess kind of translates more to glam, I guess. Um, yeah, but otherwise, I think I just kind of expected a solid album that was going to be a little bit artsy and
Yep.
very UK.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I knew once I heard the chorus of Starman, I recognized it, and I think I only recognized it because I think over this last couple of years it's been featured on some ad that always pops up on YouTube or the TV.
Yeah, it was
So
using the Lightyear trailer.
yeah, okay, I think maybe that's
Oh
what it
yeah.
was. Yeah, because I,
And
I
then I think a
remember
commercial. I forgot what commercial it was.
yeah, there's like a commercial for like yeah, perfume or something where it's like the chorus. I was like, I recognize the chorus. And then Tony pointed out that I think Suffrage City is on one of the Rock Band games, which we definitely played a lot of when we were younger. So I kind of also was a little familiar with just the sound of that song, but
Oh, okay.
other than
Yeah, it was
like
like Rock Band 1, I think.
yeah, so other than like the parts of both those songs, I didn't know anything else, and I really didn't know the full song of either one. So yeah, it was a pretty new listen for me.
Yeah.
And I think with this episode, we decided we're gonna go song to song because I don't know if you caught this on Tony without even doing any research, but this definitely is a concept album, or at least a loose concept album. And I feel like you have to kind of really dive into each song to get the most out of it. So, you
That's a
know,
perfect segue to our next section, which is like just a brief album history of it, which I think it's arguably the best concept album of all time, and maybe even the best album in general of the 1970s.
oh, that's a
Like
bold
a big
statement.
statement, but
Wow.
I know it's a big statement. Others would say, like Tommy is like typically mentioned as like best concept album. That's also like a rock opera at the same time, but this isn't as like big in length as Tommy, but it's just
So by rock opera, because just knowing what Tommy like is about, knowing that like
yeah.
it's a story. How would you describe the rock opera? Or how would you describe it in terms of this album?
What, Tommy?
Or no, this one like there's a story
Yeah, so
being told throughout each song, right? That they connect one another.
yeah, so basically this my own what's it perspective or perception of it is basically nothing has been the same since this album was released on June 16th, 1972. I believe Major Tom, Bowie's first character from Space Oddity, his first single, I believe Major Tom was sent down to Earth to become Ziggy Stardust to save the planet from impending disaster, whether that disaster is ecological apocalypse or on a human level. So the Starman Ziggy, he changes Earth's views on sex, identity, politics, and rock and roll. And he's saying basically we would continue destroying ourselves if humans kept up the walls and ancient beliefs that they had on sex, identity, and politics. I feel like, it foreshadowed the decadence and debauchery of the 1970s. Um, and even like from the research, it wasn't originally constructed as a concept album, but the songs as they were recording like seemed to fit together. And I guess he rewrote Moon Age Daydreams, Star, and Hang On to Yourself to fit that narrative. And it's also like the album and the tour where Bowie put all of his art influences in a blender, music, theater, acting, film, science fiction, fashion, literature, opera to create um, Ziggy Stardust, the album. He played the part methodically that he looked like an alien that had just landed to Earth with his colorful suits and the red hair. And Bowie has said that there was a point where he didn't know if he was David Bowie or Ziggy Stardust, which is why he had to retire Ziggy at the end of the tour in July 1973.
And just to get this right, the Spiders from Mars, that was like Ziggy's like backing band, right?
Yeah. So the Spiders from Mars, like, and for the sake of this conversation, we're going to talk about the lineup that was on the album, which was Mick Ronson, the guitarist, who played a vital role as Bowie's lead guitarist, and he also did piano and keyboards and the arrangement at the time. I truly believe that Bowie wouldn't have achieved the success that he achieved at the time without Ronson's input and help in the song arrangements. Trevor Bolder was the bassist, and Mick Woodmansey was a drummer. And those three, they played on Bowie's albums, Hunky Dory, which was the album before Ziggy Stardust, and then Aladdin Sane, the album after Ziggy Stardust.
So they were kind of his. They were with him from some of his more important albums, right?
Yeah, so basically, I think Mick Ronson and Mick Woodmansey they played on his second album, The Man Who Sold the World, and then Trevor Bolder came after.
Now I know I've heard of Mick Ronson before, but like
Yeah.
I don't know, Tony, if you've talked about him before. Like I've heard his name, but I wouldn't have been able to tell you that he was, a part of Bowie's band. And the
Uh, I,
other guys I've never heard of before, just out of my own
No,
ignorance.
that's understandable.
yeah, I'm in the same boat. I feel like I've heard Mick Ronson multiple times, but
I
but
hope you're not
nothing's really ringing
confusing
a
him with
bell.
Mark Ronson.
No, no, I think the first time you said it, I did for a second, and I was like, no, no,
Hmm.
no, different guy, different guy. Both music, but yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah. So I did read that when I was doing some research. Yeah, I did read how he retired the character. And I didn't read anything anywhere that he ever, you know, played as Ziggy again. Correct? Like there was never
No.
another concert or performance.
Nope. After so they did a concert movie about that was filmed at the last show, July 3rd, 1973 at the Hammersmith Odeon, in which they had re-released last year for its 50th anniversary of the show. So that was the last show of the tour, and he says like at the end before Rock and Roll Suicide that it's the last show that they'll ever do. So and then he essentially, I guess you could say, broke up the band after that show.
Wow, that's actually kind of crazy.
And when they did this tour, would they like play like the album like sequentially,
No.
or they would just end it with, you know, yeah.
No, they did it. They didn't do it like, how it's a lot of bands do it today where they play it in order. Even the Who I think most of Tommy in sequential order in its original tour. But no, this wasn't like I think the set lists were mostly the same, but they weren't like, it didn't start with like 5 years or whatever. It would start like with Hang On to Yourself, Ziggy Stardust, and then like I forget what else. But there have been a couple live albums too that are really good listens of
Yeah, and
that.
this is his fifth album, right? So he had definitely a lot of other songs to include in the set.
Yeah.
And you brought up Major Tom. I kind of totally forgot. Like that's a song of his that I think I do know, especially if I like probably if I listen to it right now, I'd be like, oh, I recognize that. But
Yeah,
I
Space Oddity begins with Ground Control to Major Tom.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I
Major
totally forgot
Tom,
about that.
yeah, and Major Tom is even referenced in Ashes to Ashes.
Well, so he could have had kind of a lot of connecting storylines throughout a lot of his songs, it seems like, even if they're not, you know, a direct reference, like, Major Tom is not like directly mentioned on this album, but it seems like a lot of the themes are similar.
Yeah. I think that just all goes back also to all his influences between like, science fiction, books and movies and music. So he's very methodical and knew what he was doing.
And I guess you could say the story of this particular album really begins with the first song, right?
Right. So if that's what you want, yeah, 5 years. Um, did you want to like start doing the songs now, or did you want to talk about your experiences with the album before it, or do it
Yeah,
after?
let's do a brief. Yeah, like Tony, I'm curious. Just give me your brief what you thought of the album, maybe on your first listen, and maybe if you got more from it on further listens, and then we'll do the songs, and then we can sum it up at the end.
Yeah, so on first listen, it actually kind of met my expectations.
Hmm.
I was like, this is a solid album. And it definitely is artsy in some of its lyrics, some of its kind of I won't say chaotic, but it's quite energetic at times.
Yeah.
Um and each time I listened to it, the more I kind of started noticing things about it. And I kind of started, thinking about it like, oh, well, this song kind of pairs with this song well. And and some of it's a little more obvious, like just saying Starman, Lady Stardust, and Star all have, and Ziggy Stardust all have Star in it.
Yeah.
Um, and I think once I got to maybe like my third or fourth listen, I'm like, okay, clearly something's up. Let me go to Wikipedia. Let me see what's happening. And then it kind of briefly, I just kind of skimmed over, it's a loose concept album and everything. And then quickly, I was able to kind of put the pieces together, and um, whether or not how I'm not sure how specific this story is, this narrative, but I kind of like that I was able to kind of put my own interpretation to it. At least
Yeah.
that's how I kind of like doing it.
Hmm.
Um, but no, I ended up actually quite liking this album. Um, and something that it sounds like, and it was kind of confirmed when I was reading the Wikipedia, is that a lot of these songs are played live, or
Hmm.
recorded live, and I think that really was to the album's benefit.
Oh yeah.
Because it's they sound like a band, and that's the whole point of this
Right. I
album.
think that's how it was too at the time that they played together live in the studio for the takes, not like how it's done today.
Right, right. So yeah, I enjoyed the album, and I'm definitely curious to hear Rico's thoughts on this because him and I kind of touch base. We try not to give anything away, but it seemed like Rico's mind definitely changed from his first listen to his fifth, sixth listen or whatnot.
Yeah, that's why I don't want to hear like any of your thoughts in the group chat before we did this.
Yeah, well, on my first listen, I came out actually pretty impressed, and I think what I was most impressed about was the music and specifically the playing
Hmm.
um, from each band member.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm someone who maybe that kind of the opposite of Tony. Lyrics are kind of sometimes the first thing that I intake when I listen to a piece of music.
Yep.
And after hearing the lyrics of 5 years and then just reading the track list and seeing that some of the songs are just connected, like Tony said, by similar themes, Star being one of them. I'm like, yeah, this is definitely going to be a concept album. Because
Uh-huh.
I try not to do research until at least after my first listen.
Right.
Because I want to kind of go in surprised. And
Mhm.
I think I really like on the first listen, and maybe my biggest hang up with Bowie up to this point, before really listening to this album, was not loving his voice, which usually isn't an issue with me. As you know, I listen to people, we both listen to people like Dylan and Petty
Yeah.
have distinctive voices that some people, don't enjoy, uh
Especially Bob.
yeah, exactly. And I went into this album thinking like, okay, his vocals are what's going to keep me from loving it. Um, and on first listen, I think I was so impressed with the musicality of everything
Yep.
that I his vocals didn't really bother me at all. And then when I went back, on my second and third listen, then I actually started trying to listen to the lyrics more. I almost think on the first listen, I was just really grooving to the music. I mean, there were songs
Yep.
that we'll get into here that I was just like absolutely loving the composition and the playing that on my second and third listen. Then I started piecing together the lyrics, and I think once I did that, then like because I was so impressed with everything else, even after, probably my 10th listen, I was like, yeah, his vocals aren't the highlight for me. And I don't know if that's, if a lot of people would agree or not, but I'm like, everything else is so well done that it's like, yeah, every time I listen, I was finding more and more things to enjoy about the album and the production and the sequencing. And, um, you know, I, I really came away surprised with how much I enjoy this album. And not that I didn't think I wasn't, but I was really like, okay, is the hype, is me enjoying the album going to overcome the hype? Because like I read on Wikipedia,
Yeah.
like there's people who can, not just you that can, consider this like the top 5 albums of all time, not just of the 70s, So
Yeah.
I was like, and I can see where they're coming from,
Oh
uh,
yeah, you hear that hype. Like you same thing with me. I read about the hype. I was like, all right, let me check it out.
Yeah, and I definitely think it lives up to the hype. And it's still an album that I think over time I listen to more and more, I can see myself, really putting it up there, because like, yeah, right now it's going to be hard for me to put it over, let's say like a Neil Young album or something,
Yeah,
an album I've heard for a long time. But um, yeah, I totally understand and see how he influenced so many people, so many other different artists who, I've listened to pretty much all my life.
right.
Um, yeah, so and I have a lot of notes for each song. Like there, to me, there wasn't really a dull moment. Even like maybe my least favorite song or two. Like there's still things about those songs that I appreciated a lot from, and there were actually a couple songs that I really liked even on my first listen, which sometimes it's hard for me. Tony and I do, we listen to a new album every month, and sometimes it takes me 3 listens before I'm like, okay, I can see my favorites. This album, there were at least 3 that I immediately like really enjoyed off first listen.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I think we go into each song now.
Yep.
Definitely I'm letting you kind of steer the ship now, because especially when it comes to like the history with any of the songs or the lyrics, even I feel like when I did my research for the lyrics, even I felt like I was still missing key elements. Um, and I know if I'm missing some, Tony's definitely missing some too.
Uh,
Hey,
well, I'll do my best.
But I definitely could tell from 5 years, um, even actually from like a music standpoint, I could definitely tell like this was the beginning of the story, which actually lyrically almost sounds like the ending of a story as well.
but can I be honest here?
Yeah.
So when I first heard 5 Years, and this is without looking into the album at all,
Hmm.
my first thought was, why didn't they close the album with this song? It feels like such a closer track.
Well,
I mean, it
I
sets up everything, but
I could see that.
I agree with Tony, and actually in my notes I put that I wonder if this would be a better album closer than opener, even though I do think Rock and Roll Suicide is the better closer out of the
Oh,
two.
easily.
But I do think 5 years, and Tony, I don't know if you're going to disagree with me on this, but like the feeling 5 years gave me, just as like an album opener, was kind of similar to the album opener of the Tom Waits album gave me. Um, I'm drawing a blank on what the song is called. It's like one of his bigger ones.
Waltz and Matilda, Tom
Yeah, like
Crawford, Blues.
it, in the sense that it reminded me of like this song sounds grand and big and like, even though I don't think it like was a single, it sounds like it could be, but it felt a little weird as an opener, even though it's a song that like it musically it builds and it does what you want really for an album opener. I kind of agree with you, Tony, where I was like, huh, this is, and I really enjoy the song. I was just like, as a first song, this is an interesting way to start it.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you on that. Like, it's not necessarily like, it's kind of in the middle if you look at it objectively. Like it's not too fast, not too slow. There's nothing too crazy going on. But I think the build and the character of the song, and of course the lyrics, is what really makes it stand out truly.
Yeah, because it's like fading in with that drum beat. It's like a film fading, starting on a fade in. Like you're immediately drawn into this world that Bowie has created. So
Yeah,
it's
and
like,
a
especially as a
world that's
drummer, so I'm
ending.
like, as a drummer, I'm like, oh, I love this beat already. And it's been like 5, 10 seconds of my first listen. I'm like, okay, you got my attention right away.
Oh yeah, immediately I thought the drums. I love the production, like the way the drums sounded.
Yeah.
Like
And
I don't know if you consider it like a dry sound kind of, but like it had a very like it felt very thought out the way they made the drums sound. Like they sounded like extremely on purpose, if that makes sense.
Very
yeah, the
intentional.
Yeah,
70s, like,
intentional. That's the word.
yeah, the 70s drum sound is known to be very dead, much to Steve Van Zandt's disliking, except Led Zeppelin albums, because Jimmy Page knew what he was doing. But yeah, it's like But yeah, I love it. The drum sound is fine. I mean, it was recorded, tried in studios in London.
And I like this song a lot because it kind of like Tony was talking about when he was talking about the album having this kind of chaoticness to it.
Yeah,
Like this song, like it not only builds musically, but like lyrically too. Like,
right.
he's singing about just from my research and my own, putting things together, like the earth has 5 more years to go before
Exactly. Yep.
it's dead or the humans on it are dead. And I think my favorite thing about the song is like as the song's going on, like you get these lush strings coming in and
Yep.
there's not a whole lot unless I'm missing something. I don't know, Tony, maybe if you caught it. Like I didn't hear a lot of guitar in the song. It was piano, drums, bass. This is one of the many songs where I wrote down notes thinking that the rhythm section was fantastic. Even though Tony said it's more of a mid-tempo song, I thought the bass and drums really played off one another quite well. But yeah, it's like it's rising and rising in sound and instrumentation. And the
Hmm.
lyrics too, they're kind of like getting a little darker. And except like when you get into like the second verse, he like, you know, and I don't know if I think the hardest thing about this album for me, story wise, is sometimes in the songs, I'm not sure who the narrator is. Like he
Yeah.
mentions he sees someone in an ice cream parlor
Hmm.
drinking milkshakes.
Yeah, I was
And I
that verse
love
was
that part.
part of my notes.
I love that part because like he sees someone not really caring that the world's about to end. And it kind of stands out in a moment in the song where it's like it's building and becoming more chaotic and especially at the end vocally too.
Yep.
Even though, like I said, sometimes his vocals I can get hung up a little bit on them. Like I love the passion he put into them, and yeah, like that part in kind of in the middle where he's seeing someone smiling and having fun and drinking a milkshake.
Hmm.
I really like that small detail in the lyrics.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I like I said how I like I said about the album, like especially the song, I look at it as told by Major Tom as he's transitioning into Ziggy Stardust, and he does transition at the end of that verse where he says, I think I saw you in an ice cream parlor, drinking milkshakes cold and long, smiling and waving and looking so fine. Don't think you knew you were in this song, and it was cold in the rain, so I felt like an actor. And I thought of Ma, and I wanted to get back there. Your face, your race, the way that you talk. I kiss you, you're beautiful. I want you to walk. So right there is he's transitioned into Ziggy, he's playing a role. So you could also look at it as Bowie himself saying, I'm transitioning into this character, Ziggy Stardust.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. There brought a
So
lot
I
of light to this.
so did a lot of that go over your head, Tony? Like the first time you listened to the song?
No, get out of here.
No.
No, I
Okay,
wouldn't say it went way over my head.
I'm just asking. It's an honest question.
Yeah, yeah.
One thing, Tony, I'm curious if you caught on this song, and there's another song I know I put in my notes that he almost like kind of breaks the third wall. Like when Chris
Hmm.
was saying the lyric, didn't think you knew you were in this song. There's a couple songs where he talks about like the song as if like he's writing it then and there, which I found interesting.
I
Yeah.
think I remember something else in the album like that. I couldn't tell you what it was though, top of my head.
I think he
Yeah.
was intentional in doing that and just not having a clear narrator.
Um, Tony, where was the instrumentation on this opener what you were expecting on the album? Because like I said, I was a little surprised on the lack, at least like the lack of like apparent in your face guitars.
Well, I will say this. Um, when it first started off, I wasn't that, surprised. I was like, okay, it's like piano, drums, and bass. There's strings in it. Like that kind of outline. I'm like, okay, I'm not shocked. What kind of surprised me more is how quickly all these guitars, showed up on the album. Um, so in a way, like that made me appreciate this as an opener kind of being more sparse, and it's kind of hard because it's like sparse because it lacks those heavy guitars, but it also feels quite lush at the same time. Which I think definitely allows Bowie to shine on this track.
Yeah,
Um,
and you have him playing his 12-string acoustic on the song as well and throughout the album.
oh, okay, I didn't know that.
So yeah, so like when the piano first starts, I think it just blends in so well with the 12 string. That's why you probably didn't notice it.
Right. Well, I do remember. Yeah, there was a lot of great like texture work.
Yeah,
And I do remember something going on with the piano, but definitely no clue that was Bowie, on the 12 string. So
yeah.
that definitely gonna go back and listen to that a little closer.
Hmm.
Yeah, I read somewhere, I think maybe on Wikipedia, that some critic or someone mentioned how this album is great when you want to listen to Bowie's like rhythm guitar work,
Yeah, definitely.
which I like that because I definitely when it comes to guitar, I'm more of the rhythm guitarist where Tony's more of like a lead guitarist.
Yeah, I'm like you, Rico, and
Yeah,
I just
yeah,
attempt to do a lead or whatever.
yeah. I usually stick to the chords. And then one thing I liked about this song is how you know kind of quick it builds and
Hmm.
it ends basically the same way it started, which is that drum beat.
Yeah, and he would even reference and use that drum beat to close out to end the song. You feel so lonely you could die from the Next Day album. So I was like, oh, I just so he connects the way he would just connect songs through like decades was amazing. And I also read that he said that All the Young Dudes is about the song's same apocalyptic news. And All the Young Dudes came out, I think, the same year as well, 1972.
Yeah, actually, Tony was the one that he was the one that a couple weeks ago he texted me about how Bowie actually wrote that song, and I
Hmm.
I had no idea.
And the reason I brought it up is because I didn't actually know, not to jump too far ahead, but that Suffragette City was initially the one he tried to give Mott the Hoople, but I guess
Yeah,
they turned it down, which that blew my mind. I'm like, that's a great song though, but we'll
right.
get into that later.
Yeah. And one
Um,
last thing about 5 years, I feel like it's possibly the best album opener ever, but I go back and forth with Elton John's Funeral for a Friend, Love Lies Bleeding from his Goodbye Yellow Brick Road album.
yeah, but you might have to end up giving us one of his albums too, because I've heard them. I've heard a couple like full length albums, but not where I was sitting down and like paying attention and giving him multiple listens.
Right.
I don't know. For me, album opener, look, especially if we're sticking to like the classic rock, I think I have to give it to Thunder Road myself. Maybe my
I could
maybe
definitely see that.
my favorite song of all time.
Mm.
Tony, I don't know if you want to throw us your favorite album opener here.
Um, well, album openers can definitely take its shape in different ways, but I mean, kind of out of the albums that we all kind of intersect on, I think Badlands does a great job at
Yeah.
setting up the whole album musically and lyrically.
Which surprised me because I remember you said on like even when we recorded that episode, I don't think it was like in like your top three probably songs
I was young and immature back then.
6 months ago.
Yeah.
Um, and so one thing I love, we can transition here into the next song, Soul Love.
Yeah.
You end 5 years with drums, and then you begin Soul Love with drums again, but like different
Yes.
drums.
I just
Kind of a cool
love,
segue.
yeah, I just love how begins the album with back-to-back songs with like terrific drum grooves. I'm like, oh shit, it's like this is so good.
Now, Tony, I feel like you probably maybe got a little bit more from Soul Love than I did. And I only say that because when we were just kind of discussing, if we were going to record a cover song for this episode, this was one of the ones you'd mentioned. So I'm curious if this is one of your favorites, um, or if you were just saying that because this one seems like maybe the easiest out of the bunch.
No, I actually quite like this one. Um, initially, hearing it right after 5 years, it was actually a really great contrast. This one has a different groove for sure. It's got the congas, this really rhythmic acoustic.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's got what, like hand claps in it too.
Yep.
You hear this is where you start to hear more crunchy guitars.
Mm-hmm.
Very mid range heavy, which I am a fan for. Harmonics, and then according to Wikipedia, it's Bowie that does the saxophone in that track.
Yeah, he learned to play saxophone in his teens. And he would do it because he grew up loving jazz music, and he typically played like the saxophone on his songs that featured it, like Let's Dance and Absolute Beginners, both of his 80s songs. So that's like one
Okay,
of like his like surprising qualities that you
I
wouldn't
just
expect from it.
I just learned that today actually. Like I in my notes I wrote, "Oh, I love the sax in this song. I love it." But just today like, 10 minutes ago maybe and I was looking at the who played on this album, I was like, "Oh, wow." Like he's I think the only one credited for any type of horns on this album. So I was like, "Ah, it had to have been him."
Oh yeah.
and in reading that, kind of instantly kind of upped my respect for Bowie. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Add that to the list. Of course, the song has measures of three in it during the
Hmm.
verses. So, where you take 5 years where it's very consistent pace,
Yeah.
this one, it kind of jerks you around a little bit, which I'm a huge fan of.
Yeah, see that
Um,
So
I
like
totally that went over my head. Like even right now, like you said it, I'm like, oh, I know what you're talking about, but I see that's something I would never be able to pick out of a song, I guess.
yeah, it's like probably the English side to him, just like messing with us rhythmically.
um, and let me know what you guys think about this. The background vocals, the Oz,
Hmm.
they kind of remind me of the Oz in American Girl. Like the high, kind of really compressed falsetto thing. Not sure if
Ooh, I
rings
trying
a
to look
bell.
at my head.
I can see that. I can see that.
Uh,
Um, I don't know if that's like a product of like I don't know if that's something that was done on a lot of albums in this time where like
right,
a
right.
lot of people were doing it, or if that's something that you know he just kind of started doing. But I definitely did notice the backing vocals in the song, and that was one of the highlights for me, were the way, which I'm assuming the backing vocals were himself.
I'm sure it was him and Mick Ronson that did it.
Oh yeah, it does say that he was actually the only other one that did like backing vocals.
Hmm.
Yeah,
I
so
no go.
just gonna say, so me, kind of like connecting that in my head. I was like, okay, yeah, like I'm, sure it's not intentional, but that, reminding me of that was cool. And then I
I
really
like
dig
it.
how the B section kind of has like a '60s vibe to it. It's got that classic kind of like chord progression to turn around.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then the way that goes into the sax solo is fantastic. And then also too, just the second verse, being modulated up is
Hmm.
kind of interesting, but
Oh yeah.
was a nice detail. Kept it fresh, and once again, kind of made me respect him and the band a little more. And we're only on song two, and I'm already, each song so far is kind of upping me up for this.
Yeah, and from what I read, like critics, they believe like it's a song about love before the apocalypse that was mentioned in 5 years. So like, which makes you like understand. Oh, begins album with the first two songs with like distinctive like drum grooves, has like the songs going together as well as part of that concept, which was cool.
Right, and this is one that I did like the lyrics as well. My favorite lines being, "Love descends on those defenseless," and
Mm.
then of course the hook, "All I have is my love of love, and love is not loving." Great line.
Yeah, that last part, that was it, inspirations have I none, of the last part of the chorus. I had wrote down that
Hmm.
like I'm wondering if that's like possibly Ziggy talking.
Okay. Yeah, this was definitely one of the ones that was a little tougher for me to kind of put in this narrative. Like I see how it connects and stuff, but
Yeah.
once again, it's kind of hard to see like if he's talking from Ziggy or if it's like a different protagonist.
I think it just
Um,
goes like how it begins with stone love. She kneels before the grave, a brave son who gave his life to save the slogan. So you have like a mother visiting her dead son who died probably in war. And then you have like young love in the second verse, new love, a boy and girl, they talking, new words that only they can share, yada yada. So you have like different kinds of love that the song explores. And then like the verse that I like highlighted was so love the priest that tastes the word and told of love and how my God on high is all love, but reaching up my loneliness evolves by the blindness that surrounds him. I'm wondering if he's talking about people's blind faith in God and religion, because I know Bowie wasn't a believer of God the Almighty and he didn't like organized religion. So I'm wondering if that's just like him taking a dig at um, people that are like that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I wrote in my notes when you were saying like you were thinking, some of that was Ziggy narrating it.
Yeah.
I literally wrote in my notes for this song. I'm like, oh, is this what he's thinking? Um, and yeah, I found the song to be lyric just from the lyric standpoint. This is probably really the only pushback I'm gonna give on this album a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It is when it comes to like the concept, and maybe that's just because I also read you read it, which was that like the concept kind of came after once he like was going back through all the songs was like, oh, there's a lot of connecting themes and
Right.
kind of maybe rewriting a couple things to fit the narrative more.
Mm-hmm.
This is one where I was a little like maybe this one had less of the actual story of the album.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of hard to when you begin with 5 years to follow it up with almost anything lyrically. But
Right.
and I think definitely with the next song we're gonna get into the character itself more. But yeah, this one lyrically was a little harder to pinpoint because I definitely got the slogan line to meaning like fighting for a cause, like you said, her son probably dying in war.
Right. It's
Uh,
probably just like a reference to Vietnam, if anything.
yeah, so um I did like some of the lyrics, like Tony said, the love is not loving, I think is a really cool line. But yeah, the song for me, I was more impressed musically. Of course, the sax, as we've already mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, Tony mentioning all the complex things, like even the modulation, I guess I didn't pick. Sometimes for me, modulations go right over my head unless they're like
Yep.
super obvious.
Mm-hmm.
So that and the composition that Tony was talking about, yeah, that stuff went over my head. But like, there's a lot of other things that I really enjoyed. Of course, the sax, but probably my favorite part of the song is kind of near the end,
Yep.
where the electric guitar takes over the vocal melody.
Yes.
That to me was like, and I think kind of from there on, especially I think after the modulation, like in the chorus, like the electric guitars just seem like they get a little bit like louder in the mix and a little heavier.
Mm-hmm.
And especially with the next song, but like kind of after this song, I feel like even on the songs where the guitars take a little bit of a step back, like there are just some moments on the guitar work that I just found fantastic. And this was like the first one on the album where I was like, okay, yeah, because I'm a sucker for when guitar is mimicking like a vocal melody.
Yeah, it's kind of like what George Harrison would do on Beatles songs too. Like some of his solos would just be doing the vocal melody and it just works.
I do agree with Tony too that this is I think a great song to follow up the opener.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, this is one that's like, I was ranking them like it wouldn't be, on the very top, but like I really think it transitions well. It connects this song or the last song and the next song really well. And um, I do love it for even just adding just the extra instrument with the sax. Like, I think that does a lot. There's a lot of probably albums where the first like maybe three songs sometimes can almost blend in too much to each other because it's just like the same four instruments, across all three songs. So just having this one, like having the extra guitar and
Yep.
having the sax just kind of adds dynamics to the album. And you're only two songs in, so the fact that he and the whole band were able to do that. I thought was great.
Right. Any more
Now,
thoughts on it, Tony?
What?
Any more thoughts on it, or
Oh, no, I think you guys wrapped that up well. It seems that we all kind of feel pretty similar about that song.
yeah?
And I will say, I do, when the guitar, plays the vocal melody, I do really like when Bowie comes back in to sing along with it.
Mm-hmm. Oh
I
yeah,
really like that. And to
harmonizing a
me,
lot.
yeah, to me that really feels like a band moment, like
Yeah.
everyone's together, and that was really great.
Mm-hmm. So as the songs fades out, we are all of a sudden going like, "What the heck was that?" I don't want to. I don't want to curse, but like, and so if you're not completely drawn in by now, the opening power chords and lines, "I'm an alligator, I'm a mama papa coming for you, I'm the space invader, I'll be a rock and rolling bitch for you." That'll complete the job if you're not completely drawn in to this.
yeah,
First off,
Well said.
I definitely have to say I'm gonna get this off my chest right now. This next song, Moon Age Daydream, my favorite on the album.
Really?
Yeah, are you? How are you surprised?
my man.
What? Just out of curiosity, now, Tony, what song did you think was gonna be my favorite?
Um, well, it ain't easy to choose. Sorry, bad joke. But I don't know. I would have thought maybe like Ziggy Stardust. There's a lot of great like storytelling moments in this album, so I thought you would have been drawn to that, just giving some other favorite artist of yours. Um, and I would consider this one to be. Well, I do. Okay, I can see why someone would pick this as their favorite, but I'm just shocked that you did. But
I just think this song more than any on the album, I think it does the best of both worlds, which is to have lyrics that connect with the storyline of the albums, add to the themes. It sums up. Yeah, I guess like I feel like the first song on the album where you're really starting to learn about the character of Ziggy Stardust, and then on the other side you have the music, which I think instrumentally is my favorite song on the album. There's a lot of other moments I really like on this album that we'll get to, but like, I mean, to me, like this was the song where I was just like, yeah, like his band is fantastic. I think the solo at the end is maybe my
Oh,
favorite thing on this whole album.
oh, that's like Mick Ronson's defining work as a guitarist for me.
Yeah,
solo rips.
Especially on the live versions found on Live Santa Monica 72, and then on the soundtrack for the concert movie. It's like just like insane.
yeah, this is definitely one I'd want to hear live. I stuck to just the studio album for this episode, but yeah,
Mhm.
out of like all the songs on this album, like, oh, this is probably one that just, as Tony said, would rip live. Um,
Yeah, it's glam
I
rock at its finest.
and this is where I'm like, okay, because I've heard glam rock from other bands, and I think when I've heard them from that genre from other bands, sometimes for maybe me it comes off a little corny or a
Yeah,
little
I mean it's very
outdated or
much of its
something.
time anyway. How some of them.
Yeah. But here it's just like, to me, this is like the prototype of glam rock. Like this is what all glam rock should try to be, because I think the dynamics were fantastic. I mean, like there's so many great drum fills.
Hmm.
The piano I think fits perfectly in the chorus, and yeah, like the lyrics too. It starts off very like descriptive,
Mm-hmm.
and like there were things that I like, even like doing the research, like there's like you said, the mama papa line. I Someone mentioned online like, oh, that's in reference to like how Ziggy Stardust is neither male or female.
Yeah, it's just telling you like it's androgynous, so there's no,
Yeah.
doesn't have a gender. It's just like so descriptive, so perfect, sets up the character in like those four lines, like just like the intro alone, like I just remember the first time it was just like, you had those power chords, it's just blowing the listener's mind for the first time. It's like you're actually seeing this alien from space up close. Like he's arrived.
Yeah, and then but even that Mom Papa line too, like
Yeah.
I I also found a reference to that maybe being at the time a slang word for the word motherfucker. Uh
Oh,
so
okay.
which kind of fits because like in the following line he says I'll be a rock and roll bitch for you. So I'm like that's not that far off if he was, trying to say I'm a motherfucker but
Oh,
maybe
I like
being a
that.
little bit more PG about it. And then I found another reference in the following line where he sings "You're squawking like a pink monkey bird."
Yes, I had that highlighted too in my notes of what
Yeah,
that
where
means.
it's a I read a reference to his sexuality and being gay, and I think
Yeah,
that's maybe more for Bowie than Ziggy Stardust because like we just mentioned, Ziggy Stardust kind of has no gender. Um, so yeah, like just the first verse, like lyrically, there's so much that is Ziggy Stardust, but I also feel like Bowie himself, which I like because I do feel like this album with this concept being so grand,
hmm
sometimes I'm hoping for more like personal things, and I know like I'm sure all his other albums have more of that in it because again, this was like him playing a character, but I like how this has I feel like references to himself as well, and they're just like badass lines, like it's just a
Yeah,
great way to open the song, and then you know like I read that, in the chorus, it's kind of touching on like the technical aspects of the character, like the keep your electric eye on me might be like I
yeah.
read like he might have like a camera, like his
hmm
eye might be recording, and of course you have the ray gun line, and
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean like this song is just like electric, like literally, but then just like also like lyrically too. It's a very exciting song to listen to and to dive into, and I and like even the like I said, the outro lyrically it's just him repeating a lot of lines, but because the music is just like that solo and the way
Mm.
it kind of builds, like like the first half you're like really into it for the lyrics, and then the second half you're really into it for the music. So I just thought this song had probably the best to offer when it came to really every aspect of it for this
hmm
album. But it was my favorite. I had to rant a little bit about that. But I'm still shocked, Tony, that you didn't think this would be my favorite because I thought easily you would thought this would be my favorite.
Well, okay, everything you said, I do agree with. I do think the song is strong, and I think it does offer a little bit of everything. I think for me, I think lyrically it peaks kind of early with that first verse. Like yeah, like you're saying, it's pretty badass how it starts off. It does hook you in for sure. Um, a little personal thing. And every time I hear that chorus, when he says "put your ray gun to my head,"
Yeah.
it sounds like Raycons to me. Like like the earbuds. I have a pair of Raycons. So
Oh,
every time I
okay.
hear that, I think about that. Um, Something though, I think you guys didn't really mention too much is I found this one to be pretty interesting production wise.
hmm
Like with the whole stereo field, like there's a lot going on, which makes it sound huge.
Oh
Um,
yeah, definitely the era of stereo.
right, right. And so like when the song builds with like the strings, I think like right before the solo and stuff, like it gets pretty grand. Um, I think the highlights for me is not so much like vocally or lyrically. I think the highlights are going to be those little instrumental breaks, either where like the sax is or like I forget what lyric it is, but like is it like after the chorus where the drums do like just spams the kick,
Yes.
and like the guitar does a little mute type of thing.
Yeah, I think
Like
it's like part of the chorus, like those that the drum kicks that you're talking about.
yeah, yeah. That I don't know why, but that part always excites me hearing that. And well, the real highlight, of course, being the solo.
Oh yeah.
It's got such a fuzzy, psychedelic kind of vocal like tone to it, and it's
Very out of this
unapologetic.
world. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's transcending.
I think a musical highlight for me that stands out for me is Bowie's rhythm playing on his 12 string acoustic. Because like the song just begins like with those power chords and then it goes into him strumming and then you have like Mick Ronson just like spread like spreading like little fills in until like the chorus or whatever. But I just always loved Bowie's rhythm playing on the song.
Yeah, I meant to ask if that was him also on the previous song "Soul Love," like it begins after the drums with the acoustic guitar. If that was him too with his
Yeah, I
12
think
string.
he stuck with he did the acoustic guitars on the whole album.
But yeah, no, I mean, I can go on and on about this song. It's my favorite. I mean, there's a couple others though that have really grown on me and are pretty up there too. But like this one was like the clear winner, and again, not because the others are inferior to it, but like this one just like like if I could like go back in time and hear a Bowie song, like hear my first Bowie song, I would have picked this one because this one I think would have led me into wanting to listen to more of his output.
Yeah, it just kicks your ass.
Um,
And
and
like one thing I had highlighted, one line of the song where it goes, where is it? The second verse, technically, it goes, "The Church of Man Love is such a holy place to be." I mean, I'm looking at the lyrics on Google, it's written as the Church of Man, comma, love, but Bowie makes it sound like the Church of Man hyphen love, referring to homosexuality, part of Ziggy's androgynous feature that he refers back to in that Mama Papa line as well.
okay. Yeah, see, that's what I'm saying. Like, there's a lot of, and I think I read that, like, was it around this time period where he did an interview where he came out as gay, right?
Yeah, he did that. And then I guess he came to regret doing that. Not like um in a bad way, but I forgot exactly what, but he did like say that he was, I think just to again, he was probably when he was in as the character, so he's just like kind of just messing with people just to see the reaction. Because this is like you got to think about it, in 1972, gay rights movement had just started probably a few years before with the um Stonewall riot. I think it was Stonewall riots in New York in 1969 when that club got busted by the cops. So like this is still like very fresh and like very like ahead of its time to be talking about like gender identity.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think that, like when you're listening to this album, you could say that even just the concept of this rock opera can be kind of risky.
Yeah.
And I think I read like initially, like this album went over a lot of people's heads. And it was one of those albums where like years down the road, they were like, oh, no, yeah, this whole thing is great. Like I noticed Wikipedia, like there was a whole section, like the reviews.
Hmm.
When you scroll down to the reviews on the album, you have
Yeah.
the initial reviews, but then when you're looking at the actual like scores, it says like reappraisal, and it's like every like magazine and whatnot like has it 5 out of 5 stars.
Yeah.
So it's like I think it's one of those things where like Bowie was definitely ahead of his time,
Oh, easily.
probably for like a lot of his albums, but like for sure this
Hmm.
one.
Yeah.
But I did mention that I thought this song was extremely important to like the rock opera vibe.
Oh, easily.
Um,
Yeah.
especially too, just not like with the concept of the lyrics, but like how over the top it is.
I mean, it's probably my favorite Bowie song of all time.
Okay, yeah. So see, so Tony, you are in the minority here,
I'm the odd man out.
All right.
but I do think that this same kind of the same concept of the song is kind of similar in the next song, Starman,
Yep.
but musically done in a different
Segue.
way,
Yep.
slightly. Like
Oh, yeah.
it's it's definitely more honed in. Um, so I'm curious, Tony, if you prefer this one over Moon Age Daydream.
I actually do. And I will say this about Starman just right off the bat. For some reason, this is one of the songs where I just didn't really dive into the lyrics.
Hmm.
And I think that's for two reasons. I think some of the lyrics, like in the verses, are just a little hard to hear, in the song. Not like, in a bad way or anything. But also too, I think musically and structurally, the song is so exciting that I don't think I even really need to hear every lyric for me to enjoy it. Of course, reading them when I do, it does enhance it, of course. But purely from a musical approach, I actually really like this song. Like hearing the intro it was when I first heard this, I knew like the hook of the song, but I forgot about the intro, and it starts off kind of like like kind of surprisingly dark with the chord progression.
Mm-hmm.
But kind of as the song goes, it does feel very glam. There's those bright electric guitars in there. Um, One of my favorite vocal performances on the album. I think it has one of the strongest melodies as far as the album goes as well.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I mean, it's kind of okay. It's like one of those songs where there's a lot you could talk about, but the song kind of takes you on the ride itself. You're just kind of a passenger, experiencing it, if that makes sense.
No, I get it. Because
Um,
from what I read, it was written as a request by the label when they told him the album lacked a single. So he writes this song, one of his greatest songs.
right, right. Only Bowie could do that.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
like
no,
a, no, go ahead.
I just think it's a great single. And one of my favorite parts is definitely right before the chorus. He kind of ends, the verse with that kind of laid back performance, and then you have that piano. Da,
Mhm.
da, 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 da,
Yeah, like
da.
the use of Morse code to introduce the chorus. Like,
Yeah, I didn't think about it like that, but yeah,
perfect.
that's awesome. Yeah, that's a highlight for me. It's
Yeah.
one of the songs that's really dynamic, like structurally.
Hmm.
Not even just loud, quiet. Um,
Yeah, it's
but I'm
like, no, go, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I'm really curious what Rico thinks of the song, especially now knowing Moon Age Daydream's his favorite, and as
Mhm.
well as you, Chris, that being your favorite. How do you guys feel about this more? I'm hesitant to say commercial sounding song.
Well, yeah, because I knew the chorus from those commercials we talked about earlier, but like I think I like just seeing reading the title, I was like, oh, this is probably one of the big ones.
Hmm.
And if I use Spotify on my computer more, I would know just from the listens alone that this was one of the biggest songs on the album. But I
Yeah.
didn't. So when a song first starts, like Tony said, that intro was so like almost dissonant. Like it's just like maybe purposely not supposed to sound pleasant. Like the way the vocals and the music kind of go together. The very quiet vocals, which
Yeah.
I read that like there people have different ideas of what he's actually saying in that intro.
Hmm.
Um, so I did find that to be interesting, but I was like, the song started and I was like, oh, like, okay, this is maybe the first song on the album that I'm not loving. But then like the verse starts off, not that long after. And like, this is actually maybe one of the few songs where I prefer the verses actually over the chorus.
Hmm.
Now the chorus, like Tony said, it's grand and like with the strings and it's very like almost orchestral and it's not knowing like a ton of Elton John stuff like this. I feel like Elton John could be inspired by like the chorus of the song. Um, and but like I love the verses because the the bass and the drums and the piano for some reason really click for me on this song.
Hmm.
Like,
They groove.
Yeah.
yeah, it's got a groove to it that I was not like when you hear the chorus. I don't think you would expect the verses to have that groove to it, that kind of a tempo that, like, again, like the chorus just, goes so far out that I was really liking the kind of, you know, more honed in approach with the music and the verses. And yeah, lyrically, this song I thought was one of the easier ones to understand when it comes to like the storyline.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's like Ziggy's message to the youth, but it could also be Bowie preparing the world for his career plans. In the chorus, there's a star man waiting in the sky. He'd like to come and meet us, but he thinks he'd blow our minds. I mean, Bowie definitely did that.
yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure it's one of the songs that like people probably like when he passed away, I'm sure like that was the song being played a lot because like you
Oh,
said,
for sure.
it's more than just about like Ziggy Stardust, it's about Bowie himself.
Hmm.
An interesting thing I read about the chorus is
Hmm.
that when he sings the word Starman, that octave jump apparently is the same one as in Somewhere Under the Rainbow.
Yeah, I was going to tell you guys, try singing the chorus over the rainbow during the song, and you'll see that
Did
it's the
you
same, like,
catch up?
no.
on that, Tony?
I did read it and then instantly clicked. And that makes sense because it's one of those choruses that like even though I'm not like super familiar with the song, it felt very familiar. And maybe it's just because it's a great written chorus, but that is cool to kind of hear the similarities in that, especially because this song is very very grand. I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah, and The Wizard
Um
of Oz was one of his like favorite movies too, which makes sense.
okay, yeah. That does check out then. Um
So Tony, don't go and try to watch The Wizard of Oz while you listen to this album like you did with Pink Floyd.
but it's so good. Something that I really like about the song, kind of thought of a kind of a new way to explain it. And Chris, I'm sure you'll kind of get this as a fellow Beach Boys fan. Is I'm a sucker for like a good pop song that has
Hmm.
so much packed into it.
Oh,
The
totally.
term coined with Good Vibrations, a pocket symphony.
Yep.
That's what this song kind of reminded me of. It's exciting. It's structurally, very intentional and well done. And it
Hmm.
even has like an outro that, is fairly long, given the overall length of the song.
Right.
Where
Just
once again, I think he's singing with the guitar, which,
oh, probably.
always a fan of.
And I think another thing to point out about this song is Bono has stated that the performance on Top of the Pops in 1972 was a major event for him and many like British and Irish children and teens at the time. Um, like this could be their Beatles Ed Sullivan Show moment for that. And like Bono's like not the only one that has said that. Like other artists who are like around the same age as Bono have talked about that performance like changed their life. Like Boy George, Mick Jones of The Clash, Morrissey, Johnny Marr, Sushi and the Banshee, Robert Smith from The Cure, and like Noel Gallagher have all like pointed at that performance as changing their lives. And even Elton John, who was already established at the time, was blown away by that performance.
Now this was
Wow.
one of the this the one single, because I think there was like one single that had one of the other songs as a B side, right?
Yeah, I don't know, like this song, Suffragist City might have been a B side
Yeah, I think it was a B
to
side
like
to
Rock and
this
Roll
one.
Suicide a couple years later.
But yeah,
But yeah, I
this
think
one
this was the only
feels
single. Yeah.
like the single from the album,
Hmm.
but not in a bad way. Because I know
No,
sometimes
no.
Tony and I, when we talk about singles, like Tony and I are we
We like the deep cuts.
well, yeah,
Same.
and like I got into Tom Petty listening to our parents' CD copy of their greatest hits album, right? But like nowadays, yeah, and even though I didn't grow up listening to those songs all the time on the radio, I still sometimes gravitate more towards the B sides and the deep cuts. So, but this doesn't give me like a oh I like some of his other songs I've heard on the radio to me feel more like singles, like Fame and
Hmm.
whatnot. But this one like doesn't. It just feels like a single because it's like chorus wise, I feel like it's maybe like the catchiest on the album, but like I said, the verses I think are fantastic and my favorite part of the song. And that's not maybe something that someone would think of like, oh, this needs to be on the radio.
Right. No, I mean, there's nothing wrong with singles. They're a good entry point. Like it's like you said, Tom Petty was the same way. The greatest hits. Who else?
Dude, Zeppelin's got so many great hits.
Who never released hits singles. But yeah.
Um, Now this next song on the album, which I of course didn't know about until I read the details online, but It Ain't Easy is the one and only cover on this album.
Yeah, it's like
Oh,
Oh,
yeah, it's
Tony
like
didn't
a
know this?
no, I did not.
yeah, it's like written by Ron Davies, and I remember hearing a version. I don't know who it was. It was either Ron Davies or Long John Baldry, who Elton started with before he went solo. But I heard like a different version on Tom Petty's Buried Treasure show.
Oh, nice.
I was like, oh, excellent. But yeah, like from what I read, like people don't see it as fitting the concept, but I feel like it does, of Ziggy reporting what he's seen in the future of what happens when you reach the top of the mountain and look out over the sea after you've made it. Like, life isn't as easy as you think it would be. It's like you could say it's like him saying it's the downside of superstardom.
I
That's
Yeah,
agree with.
I totally see that. That's kind of what I got from it too.
okay.
Yeah, because I'll say this, playing devil's advocate a little bit. Like I said, sometimes, I would say the biggest pushback for me on this album is sometimes feeling like the concept is either it's weird. Either sometimes I feel like it's too on the nose or not enough on the nose.
Yeah.
And I definitely could see if someone listened to this album and it was trying to be critical, I could easily see them saying, not only is it because it's a cover, but they could say, yeah, this song doesn't fit the narrative. But when I was doing research, he actually changed some of the lyrics slightly.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like just that alone was him trying to make it fit the narrative. So I don't necessarily like agree with the fact that like, oh, it shouldn't have been on the album because it doesn't fit the narrative. Because I do think at the end he makes it fit the narrative. Um, and for me, after like my second or third listen to the album, the chorus of the song was actually like maybe the thing that got stuck in my head the most.
Yep.
And I didn't think I was gonna like it all that much just from the verses, because this is kind of the opposite of what I was saying about Starman, where the verses don't really reel me in,
Mm-hmm.
but that chorus when it gets a little heavier with the guitars, like that, I was like, okay, this is what I'm really enjoying with the song. And I actually do think it definitely rose for me when it comes to like ranking the songs on the album, just because of like how catchy that chorus is. And again, it's I think a universal message, but one that you can definitely make it fit for this album.
Right. And it was recorded a year before during the Hunky Dory sessions, which is why Rick Wakeman, who would later join Yes, is credited as playing, I think, the harpsichord on the album. Because Bowie wanted him to join the band, but Rick Wakeman instead joined Yes.
Do you know that, Tony?
I did read that on the Wikipedia, and I got really excited seeing that. I'm like, Rick Wakeman played
Yeah.
harpsichord on this song?
Wait, so you read that, but you didn't read that it was a cover?
Well, clearly I was distracted by the news of Rick Wakeman on it, as
Yeah.
I am a Yes fan.
Because Rick was also on the Hunky Dory album, which makes sense why he's credited on this song.
Well, now I'm curious. I'm gonna have to go check out Hunky Dory then. But this song, for me, it was my least favorite on first listen. And I think maybe part of it is that even though lyrically I can connect it to the story, I think the delivery of it, and which makes sense from it being recorded, in previous sessions, it feels detached. Like it just feels like a different style. And I think because he's so committed to the character, it comes off feeling, I don't want to say like fake or forced, but when you look at the context, it makes sense. And I don't discredit it. I think it's a good performance still. And I think it should be on the album. I think it was my least favorite because I think when you look at it kind of objectively, it kind of comes off just kind of as a straightforward rock song.
But I kind of like that about it. Like I kind of liked this and Starman being a little bit more straightforward after having some more grand moments with like 5 Years and Moon Age Daydream.
Let's see, I don't know if I would consider Starman straightforward. Like there's a lot to unpack from Starman, where I think this song there's not as much to unpack. But I actually did appreciate that later on, because for me the magic of the song is just quiet verse, loud, energetic chorus, quiet verse. It's that back and forth. And I actually did end up liking that. Like you said, the chorus is quite catchy. The guitars sound great in there. There's no arguing that. And I do like harpsichord. Like the verse, the the bass with it is kind of a nice texture. But yeah, I mean, I guess I don't have as much to say about that song, but that's not a bad thing.
Right. It's probably my least favorite too, only because there are just so many like other better songs on here. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the song. It's just I prefer a lot of the others over it.
So that's interesting that it's like your guys is both your least favorite. and maybe we'll segue since it seems like you guys. And I think I pretty much said all I wanted to say with this one. But the next song, Lady Stardust, that's actually my least favorite on the album.
Oh, interesting.
Well, it's also kind of my second least favorite too. Those two songs in a row, It Ain't Easy and Lady Stardust, that was the biggest lull of the album for me.
To me, it wasn't. It's okay if I'm showing my cards a little bit here, a little earlier, a little too soon than I should. It wasn't this song and Lady Stardust back to back. For me, it was Lady Stardust and Star back to back.
Take
Those
that back.
and I will say Star I've come to appreciate way more. And I definitely do like Star a lot more than Lady Stardust.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, to me, Lady Stardust, and I think it's more of a me thing. Like I don't think it's a bad song whatsoever. I just think, and I know lyrically too, this one's very important because, um, well, I guess the one thing I was going to mention with "It Ain't Easy" with Ron Davies was that I read that it seems like some people have different interpretations of who Ziggy Stardust was like inspired by
Yeah,
because
there's a lot of
I
people.
read some say that it was Ron Davies, and then but with Lady Stardust I read that that song was inspired by Mark Bolan,
Yeah, T-Rex.
which Tony had mentioned T-Rex to me the other day, and I don't know if it was in reference to this, but when I read Mark Bolan, I didn't know that was T-Rex. Like I didn't put two and two together.
Yeah, because they were
Um,
great friends, Bowie and Mark. And like I read the demo for the song was called He Was All Right, a song for Mark. And Mark, like you said, was listed as an influence on the Ziggy character, which the lyrics support. And like even the language on the album too, a lot of those like weird stuff like freak out and a moon age daydream, wham bam, thank you, ma'am. A lot of like that, what's the word I was looking for, but offbeat stuff like came from Mark Bolan.
Interesting.
yes. So I think that like Lady Stardust is important to the narrative. And I feel like just him naming it Lady Stardust, that
Yeah,
alone, like he could have. I mean, the original title, I don't think he was going to keep the for Mark part in it, but
right.
like he could have named it something else. So
Hmm.
I feel like he maybe I'd be curious to like know if this is a song he considered really important on the album. The only reason I couldn't connect to this one as much was, and this is probably the only song on this album where it's like this, where it was the music I didn't enjoy, which up to this
Mm.
point, I've actually been praising the music, even maybe more so than the lyrics or Bowie's vocals. And just as it's just, I didn't love I guess the piano, like the overall melody. But I
Hmm.
will say on repeated listens in the chorus,
Yeah.
there's a chord change where I don't know what line. I
Is it
think it's near
where
the
he does the falsetto? Really out of
yeah,
sight?
yes. That chord
Oh,
change I really enjoyed.
oh yeah. Woo, how I sighed when they asked if I knew his name.
Yeah. So yeah, so that like made me appreciate the song.
Hmm.
But I had to kind of that one I had to give like, on the fifth listen, that's when I was like picking up on like that melody that I like enjoyed.
Yeah, I think
Um,
like the piano, like giving the song an Elton John vibe, which I love.
and
But let
yeah,
me,
Yeah, I picked that up.
maybe
yeah,
that's why I didn't love it as much because I've yet to be able to. I appreciate Elton John, but I don't love Elton John.
let me ask you
Um,
guys this: what do you think Lady Stardust is about? Who do you think Lady Stardust is?
Like, who do you think it's kind of like modeled after?
No, like
no,
in terms of the concept.
Hmm.
well, I thought I don't know because when I going off the first verse, I almost wondered if it was some other persona of Ziggy Stardust because he sings Lady Stardust saying his songs. So like Lady Stardust, you wouldn't think is a he, right?
Hmm.
Right.
And as we've already discussed, Ziggy himself is neither a he or she. But
But if you
I'm
go,
but
mhm,
I'm
go
not sure. I don't know. See, this is where I'm wanting your insight because this is where I feel like I'm missing a little piece of the puzzle.
We'll go back to Moon Age Daydream, the beginning of the lyrics.
He's a mama papa.
So I'd say Lady Stardust is is Ziggy's female side.
Oh, okay,
Mmm.
okay.
People stared at the makeup on his face, laughed at his long black hair, his animal grace.
Alligator.
Yeah.
Okay.
Femme fatales emerged from shadows to watch this creature fair. Boys stood upon their chairs to make their point of view. And then, like, well, Rico pointed out already, ooh, how I sighed when they asked if I knew his name. So people might not, they probably think Lady Stardust is someone separate from Ziggy when he's just, what was I going to say? I lost my train of thought. I feel like Frank Costanza now.
No, but that makes sense because yeah, like he definitely throughout the whole song, I think he only uses the male pronoun, he, him.
Yeah.
But that no, that makes sense. And I also want to put this out before I forget it. I guess in the outro, you can hear him say, "Get some pussy now." Um, I don't know if Tony caught that.
I did not. But we'll go back to listen to it later.
Yeah. But
Um,
again, it's radical for 1972 to be singing about androgyny and cross-dressing.
well, and this is where too I feel like this is like in the point of the album, especially obviously with like the next two, where we're
Mm-hmm.
really getting into Ziggy's like his performance side,
Yeah, for
like
why
him,
he came down here.
yeah, like him and you know the spider monkeys from Mars, the spider monkeys,
Spider
spiders from Mars.
monkeys.
I don't know where I got. I don't know where I got monkeys. There's too much going on in my brain right now. But yeah, like yeah, I feel like this is like I almost feel like this song, and then the next two songs, "Star" and "Hang On to Yourself." I feel like they're almost, and then of course, I feel like we get a little bit too in Suffer City. Like it's him exploring, like it's because there's definitely correct me if I'm wrong. There's definitely like a part on the album where he like Ziggy like wants stardom, right?
Yeah, which is perfect segue to Star, because he says in the chorus, I can make a transformation as a rock and roll star. So
Yeah,
Ziggy's
yeah,
like,
that's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
so Ziggy's basically saying, I came down. He's like, and to get your attention, besides the way I'm dressed, I'm gonna be a rock and roll star because that's what the kids love is music. So he figured to get their attention, he'll be a rock and roller.
And the reason I like Star more, even
Yep.
though I would maybe say Star is like my, well, I don't know. I maybe like Star more than It Ain't Easy. It ain't easy has been really growing on me though. But
Hmm.
um, I like that Star. It's like, okay, we're taking the piano from the previous song from Lady Stardust, but we're like we're ramping up the energy, right?
Yeah, and I think that definitely comes from his love of Little Richard, who was like one of his biggest influences,
Okay, I can see that.
and another musician who was, you say, controversial at his time. And I think he kind of hid probably, I don't know if he was Little Richard was, I don't know if he ever came out as gay, but like imagine like having a gay black man come out in like the 50s and 60s, and it was bad enough for white people as it is. So now imagine how it would have been for a black person.
Right.
Did you find this song more? Well, Tony, no, you said the last two were your least favorites. So for you, Tony, was this like a kind of jump back up for you, like in quality for the album?
Well, I say this kind of loosely, a little playfully. This is where the album starts to get good.
Oh, it just
Um,
ramps up.
yeah, like I do like how the album starts off. The first four songs.
Hmm.
5 years, Soul Love, Moon Age Daydream, Starman. Like it builds the story. It really sets a tone. But then as we enter Stardom, and a lot of like, I don't know, it feels a lot of sexual themes and stuff
Oh
kind of
yeah,
comes up.
which is
It
characteristic of glam rock.
Right, it goes off the rails, and
Oh yeah.
I mean, and I swear it's not because the song starts off with Tony went to Belfast, but this is like one of my favorites, easy. It is so exciting. It's in your face and loose. It feels like the train's about to come off the tracks.
Yep.
The slide guitar lead that comes in, that can make me tingle a little. Uh, as far as like Bowie's performance, I felt like he managed to keep up with the music,
Mm-hmm.
with some very surprisingly tight backup vocals too throughout it. And then like the icing on the cake for me is when he does that falsetto near the end, and he does that whole day in the life, with his voice. I mean,
Yeah.
it vaguely sounds like it, but that was like the icing on the cake. Um, but it's just awesome. The drums are sick. It starts off with like a pretty orchestrated part, and it's dynamic. I just love that when anytime he stops to say rock and roll star.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I had to get all that off my chest before Rico shits on the song or something.
No, I'm not going to
Yeah.
shit on it. I am going to choose to ignore your tingle reaction to the song, but um, this song, this one did take me a little bit longer to get into. But when
Mm-hmm.
I did get into it, and you guys might not agree with me at all, but you two are the people that would possibly agree with me the most on this statement.
Mm-hmm.
It gave me a little bit like, okay, you know how Billy Joel would write songs that he would want to give to another artist? This felt like if Billy Joel was to write a song that he thought David Bowie could perform and play and sing. Like that's kind of the vibe it gave me.
Ooh.
Oh,
But like
I
in
interesting.
a
like that.
great way, and like in a good way, like
Yeah.
because we all three of us love Billy Joel. And this felt like one of Billy Joel's more up tempo rockers,
Yeah.
because like Billy
Hmm.
Joel's up tempo rockers like has great guitar and drums and bass, and that's what this song does have. So like when I kind of made that connection in my head, I was kind of like, okay, I can see why this song is infectious because it has similar qualities to other performers that I enjoy. And the other thing too that made me appreciate this song is that like there's so many references to, like Star on this album, and I know we're talking about now in the album how it has to do with Ziggy wanting to be a rock star, maybe in order to save the world that's about to,
Mm-hmm.
be lost in 5 years.
Yeah.
That like, yeah, he's talking about a rock and roll star, and that's why the song's maybe just titled simply Star. But like it just keeps bringing me back to the imagery of actual stars, in space,
Hmm.
which is where Ziggy came from.
Yeah.
And so I like that, like, kind of dual meaning to Star and Lady Stardust and Starman, like, yeah, sometimes it's the literal sense, like, he's a rock star. And then sometimes it's like, no, he's a star man. He's from outer space. And
Mm-hmm.
I like that, how that can be open to interpretation. And maybe on the first couple listens, that's where I was a little like rolling my eyes a little bit, like, oh, the concept, like, yeah, he just named a bunch of songs with star. But like, now after like my, 10th listen, I'm like, okay, wait, he's doing this with purpose, and part of it is to let the listener kind of decide, which I always enjoy that. Like, yeah, I love songs that have really distinct purposeful meanings, but then I also love it when a songwriter decides to let things up to interpretation.
Yeah, 'cause like the beginning, you have Tony, who's a soldier, Rudy, who I believe is a starving artist, where he says Rudy stayed at home to starve. Bevan is a politician, and Sonny is an activist. And you can see it as like Ziggy saying, doesn't want any of this. He says life is much more worth living as a rock and roll star, especially if we're going to die in 5 years. So might as well make it all worthwhile.
Oh, and that's what I meant to mention too with the Billy Joel reference. Like the fact that the song begins with like these names. I don't know if I was just thinking of scenes from an Italian restaurant, but yeah, I was just like, it just gave me Billy Joel vibes. But no, yeah, this is one of the ones that I really grew to like, even if it's I think like I said, the only song that like I is definitely way lower to me on the totem pole is Lady Stardust. Like I think sometimes it changes my perspective on the song surrounding it.
Yeah.
And maybe that's my issue too, is Lady Stardust comes like almost in the middle, and I wish it
Hmm.
didn't. I would have
Right.
preferred it somewhere else on the track list, and maybe if it was moved. But that's my only issue with the sequencing. Other than that, I like Tony said, I think from Star here on out, I have no issues whatsoever.
Um,
Um,
and to kind of take what you guys have been saying, because I think those are all great points, and I do agree with it. Kind of like the whole imagery thing. Like the album starts off a lot more galactic sounding, like
Yep.
oh the world's ending in 5 years, like that's that's quite sci-fi, or however you want to label that. But then I think this song, even though it kind of starts off with like trying to make it seem like him being a star is something that is for everyone's good, for people's interest, so quickly it changes to his obsession with that fame, the glam, and everything. And I love the line, "I could fall asleep at night as a rock and roll star."
Hmm.
Um, and the something about the music and the energy and the obsession is it's kind of childlike. It kind of reminds me of like in a movie, like a scene where like a group of kids would like sneak into a casino or something and like play slot machines or something. It has
Right.
that
Just
sort of
causing trouble
infectious.
and just having fun anyway.
Exactly.
It's like funny how I look at it through how the album is constructed is despite warning us what'll happen and it ain't easy, Ziggy's still gonna live out rock superstardom anyway, even though he has seen the future and what'll happen to him. He's just gonna have fun and go all out.
Right, right.
And I always saw the line as I can make a transformation as a rock and roll star. As also Bowie telling us he's going to be a star, which happened anyway right after this album.
and what I do think is interesting is, the next song on the album still has to do with like being a rock and roll star,
Yep.
but we get a change in like perspective again because as far as I could tell in my research, the next song, "Hang On to Yourself,"
Yep.
is from the eyes of the band, right?
Yeah. Oh,
From the
definitely.
Spiders from Mars.
Yep.
And I think musically, I enjoyed the song. I think like maybe it's some of the best bass playing on the album.
Oh yeah.
Like the bass to me, like especially in the verse, is like the glue to the song.
Oh, you God,
Um,
yeah.
and but I really like the lyrics, and I really like the fact that like in the chorus, it's like the band talking to Ziggy and saying like, "Hey, don't lose sight of the dream here. Like,
Hmm.
we have a good thing going."
Right.
And I don't know if that's because in well, I don't know, maybe you can let me know. Like in the first verse, it's referring to someone, a she's doing this, she wants this.
She
And I
lost my
don't
honey
know,
and all my money. Yep.
yeah, and I don't know if that's someone talking to Ziggy, and like that's what he's focusing on her, and that's why the band's like trying to tell him to like focus up.
Yeah.
Um
He's like thinking he's focused on all the extracurricular stuff. I'll just use that word. Like instead of just focusing on the music and the performance, he's just focusing on all the perks of being um a star.
yeah, so
He's
I
losing himself.
yeah, and that's I think my biggest takeaway with this song. The other being the one thing I forgot to mention on the song Lady Stardust, the other reason why it doesn't gel with me as much
Yep.
is because that was the first song I think on the whole track list where I was like, okay, his vocals now are starting to grate on me a little bit. And before I had no issues with it because the music was so great or the performance was so great. Lady Stardust, his vocals, other than like the falsetto we talked about, I didn't love as much. But
Hmm.
here on this song on Hang On to Yourself, I really enjoy them because he's a little bit more like reserved, especially like in the chorus.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's because he's like singing from the perspective of the band, but that was
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
a little dynamic thing that I enjoyed from the song, that he gave a different performance than a lot of the other songs on the album. So I don't know if you agree with any of that, Tony.
Yeah, no, I did notice that too, that the performance felt different. But not different as It Ain't Easy, where it felt a little bit detached for me.
Mhm.
But it did feel a little different as far as how he was approaching it. And I did like too that because it's kind of coming from the band, the whole line, "You're the blessed, we're the spiders from Mars." There
Mhm.
was like a different feeling of conflict, where like a lot of the conflict in the rest of the album is like between like people not understanding, like him and the personality and like things like that. This was like it came off more like a little more maybe like jealous or bitter in a way. Or what
Yeah, I
was
could
that
see
line about
that.
the bitter guitar? Uh, well, the bitter comes out better on a stolen guitar.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really like that line. Don't even get me started with the "We move like tigers on Vaseline."
Oh, again, it's just like basically a song. I'm sure he was also observant of the time of like a lot of the groups in the late 60s and early 70s of with all the groupies and stuff. So it's definitely um probably a reflection of the time as well.
For sure.
Reminds me, School of Rock was on TV the other day,
Uh-huh.
and it just reminded me of that Miranda Cosgrove's character where she's like, I looked up what groupie is online, and
Oh,
there's
yeah.
sluts who sleep with the band. And I'm like, hey, that's what this song is.
Yeah. And like
Um,
to go back to what you guys said about like the bass and drums, like definitely you could hear its influence on punk rock a few years later, especially on like something like the Ramones, like Teenage Lobotomy or Blitzkrieg Pop before the guitars come in. It's just
Oh,
very
okay.
intense and like just keeps going. So you could definitely hear its influence on punk rock.
I think my favorite part has to be like that guitar solo bit.
Mm.
But then it's like slide guitar, and then the bass really goes off.
Hmm.
Like such a great way to like approach the end of the song. Like
Yeah.
like that's like the moment where you're already driving fast in a car, and then like your hand slips off the wheel for a second. It
Right.
goes
Or you
bonk.
just forget that you're going fast, like the end of
Right.
like the end of a rear view mirror, which I've been
and
known, which I've been known to speed up a little too much.
Now I will say I looked just right now looking online for some facts on this song. Two
Yep.
things I thought interesting. One, well, you were already talking how like this is and what a lot of people consider maybe the uh, proto song for punk.
Yep.
To the fact where I guess the Sex Pistols said this helped inspire "God Save the Queen,"
Oh, cool.
Oh.
which I thought was interesting. And then apparently the song Bowie wrote in 1971 and released it as a single under the name Arnold Corns.
Oh yeah, the group.
Yeah, and it flopped. The song flopped as a single, but then he went back and brought the song into this session, and
Yeah,
it,
and
it's
Moonage Daydream too. So if you ever have a chance to look up those two versions.
yeah. So I will say I think it's great. Bowie just from this album alone, and and maybe we'll probably touch on this when we get to like the end of the album. But I feel like a lot of the artists I listen to I could see, not maybe from a sonic standpoint, but from a songwriting standpoint, like a band, and Tony will know this a little bit from what he's heard from them, but like the Tragically Hip, like now that I'm listening to this album, I see a lot of Bowie in Gord Downey's performances. And funny enough, when the Hip released their last studio album before Gord passed away,
Hmm.
they originally were going to call it Doogie Stardust.
Hmm.
And on the front cover, there's a this little boy, this little kid who has like a mullet. And they announced this 2 weeks before he passed away. So when Bowie passed away, they decided, oh, like, you know, it'll seem like we're trying to profit from Bowie's name obviously being in the news. So they ended up changing the album title to something else, but they kept the front cover image, and which I thought was just a little great nod to him. But like, and there's other bands too, like the Killers, they have a couple songs where I think the song in particular, The Man, like Brandon Flowers is definitely channeling Bowie. And like there's a part in the song where it literally sounds like one of the sections in Fame. So,
Hmm.
I do think like this album especially seemed like it really inspired a lot of people who I love. So I'm glad now that I am finally getting into Bowie and his whole universe of characters and songs. And really the next song, which is part of, I guess that I'll call it like a small title track because there's other songs that have similar titles, but like Ziggy Stardust, the next song,
Mm.
this was my second instant favorite from the
No, it's
album.
centerpiece of the album for sure.
Yeah. And uh, I'll let Tony kind of maybe talk about the song first. The only thing I want to say is I think right away I enjoyed the song because of that opening guitar riff. Something,
Yes.
something
Yes.
about it felt very nostalgic to me, even though I did not grow up ever listening to this song. Have I heard it once before in my life? Probably on the radio or on TV or something. But like that guitar riff is just so like feel good, like laid back, like summer days vibes to me that like I don't know, it had a very nostalgic classic rock sound to it. And just from that
Oh yeah.
alone, I like the song. Like the song could have gone anywhere else and I would have still loved it just for that opening guitar riff. I don't know,
Yeah.
Tony felt similar.
Yeah, no, I agree with you with that intro riff being kind of nostalgic. And for some reason, it kind of feels like a '90s type of guitar riff.
Ooh.
I'm not sure if you guys kind of agree with that, but for some reason, something about it kind of, the kind of like the distorted chords with a little bit of picking, like it just
Or
kind of
more
gave me that
60s
vibe.
maybe. Like more folk rock maybe.
I could see that too, yeah. And what I like about the song a lot is I like the music consistently through it.
Hmm.
Like, even though, maybe lyrically this song is a little harder for me to get into, just because it's so much, about Ziggy and stuff.
Yeah.
I think musically it propels the lyrics well,
Hmm.
like dynamically speaking, and each part is distinctive, and I think it holds up, and I like too that it's like what 3 minutes and 13 seconds. It's a fairly short song,
Hmm.
um, and not to sound like I'm copping out, but I don't have a lot to say about it. I think it's a song you listen to and you just know it's good.
Yeah,
It's
no, I totally get
entertains
it.
you, and this is the one I thought would be Rico's favorite.
Well,
Mm.
you're not too far off because I would probably call this my second favorite. Yeah. So
Right.
you're on the money there because this song I really like both parts. I like the verse a lot because of that guitar riff, but I really enjoy the chorus too. Like the drums kind of go like, as I feel like in the verse it's a little bit more laid back, but the chorus there's like I don't know if you say the drums go into like double time, but like
It
it
just
they
picks up like adrenaline.
yeah exactly yeah, and it kind of breathes a different life into the song than what it had before.
Hmm.
And I think lyrically I like this song because and I don't know if this is how he wrote it as opposed to like when he looked back on the album after and was like, "Oh, this album should be about Ziggy." But like this song felt just like a perfect way where he's like, "Okay, this song is Ziggy Stardust," and he could just go anywhere with the lyrics because Ziggy's character really feels like he and she are just like everything. Like I just feel like there's so many directions that you can take Ziggy, and every one of those directions would make sense.
Yeah, because it tells
And
the story of Ziggy, even though we've had like all those the previous songs, like when he comes down, but this is like the song that I guess kind of goes with what you guys said about 5 years, how you expect like 5 years to be the end. Like by the end of this song, Ziggy Stardust, like he's basically dead.
yeah, and I'm curious if, and I didn't really see any of this in the reading I did for the research in this album, but I wonder if this was Bowie's like commentary on rock musicians in the 70s. Like I don't, or I guess
Oh,
even
for
like
sure.
late
Like
60s.
yeah, like all the people that had died, like Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison. Oh, it's like it's a warning about the excesses of that lifestyle. Because
And
he becomes addicted to drugs. he says he's well hung.
Yeah,
I
yeah, I forgot
always
about that
found that
one.
line funny, but like a great detail. He's tan, which I guess is like a reference to Iggy Pop, who was cited also as an influence on the character. And he said he has a great ass.
And but what I like though is throughout these descriptions of him, it always comes back to he could play guitar. He played guitar.
Hmm.
And I like that because, if we're comparing this song to all those musicians, who got caught up in the rock and roll lifestyle, like it does come back to like their main passion, music, and like, they could play it so well. And that's what I liked about this song. Like, yeah, this song, it could have just been it could have been the full album title on the rise and fall of Ziggy Stardust.
Yeah.
And I know with the next song too, it's like we get another kind of take on that. But like, yeah, in this song, I just really liked that it, and even the song, and I like the outro of the song. Like, it's one of
Hmm.
the songs where like it has a definitive outro. Like, the song
Yeah.
doesn't fade out and the song doesn't just like end on a chorus. Like,
With like
it
little
has,
harmonics, I believe they were.
yeah. And then it ends with him doing that vocal of him saying Ziggy played guitar. And I
Yep.
think that's like a perfect way to end the song. So, yeah, my
Yeah.
my second favorite on the album. Um,
It was another one I instantly loved on first listen. Again, it was that riff that just got me in right away. And I just love the blend of the electric and the acoustic guitars playing it.
oh yes, I wanted to. Yeah, I did have that in my notes too. That like it. This album does a great job of like with its textures between the crunchy electric guitars
Hmm.
and then the sweet acoustic guitars. Like I do love how they kind of balance one another out. And I think some of that has to do with production and like that one person said, like what you said, like this shows that like, you know, Bowie had, played guitar great too, like he
Hmm.
kind of did it all. And something I forgot to mention when we were talking about Moon Age Daydream is that apparently he played something called the penny whistle on Moon Age Daydream,
Oh yeah, I think
which
I read
looks like it's a more annoying it's a more annoying recorder,
that.
which Tony and I growing up in school, we had to play the recorder in our music class.
And I earned
Okay.
my black belt for it too.
Nice.
But yeah, like yeah, Ziggy Stardust, I think, and Tony and I, one of the things we always talk about, or maybe not always, but we do like to talk about it, is we think a title track for an album should
Hmm.
either be like the focal point of the album or should be like the best song. And I think like this is both. I think this is one of the best songs on the album. And I think this is one of the most important songs lyrically on the album too. So
Easily. And I always loved the line, making love with his ego. Ziggy sucked up into his mind like a leper messiah, how he just
yeah.
became an egomaniac.
So
And I
now
think something that I really like about the song is the placement on the album.
Hmm.
Because, as much as I love Star, Hang On to Yourself, spoiler alert, Suffragette City,
Hmm.
um, if there wasn't Ziggy in the middle, I think it would come off too kind of on the nose, a little too like like you mentioned like Little Richard kind of sounding like I don't know. I feel like having this moment where there's like not really, these fast kind of pianos and all these fast guitars, if it wasn't so grand and, I'm failing for the words here, but I like the break that it adds, the
Right.
contrast.
It's interesting. Like you would kind of expect this song to have been earlier in the album than almost at the end,
Right. That's it right there.
which I think that goes, which I just had the thought of like the genius of the sequencing where you have Moon Age Daydream, the third song of when Ziggy arrives, and I have Ziggy Stardust, the third to last song on the album.
Hmm.
and yeah, and I feel like you couldn't if you had swapped the songs, it just wouldn't make as much sense when it comes to the
No,
sequencing.
because you definitely needed that opening of Moon Age Daydream after 5 years in So Love, because I don't think this would have had the same effect
Yeah,
as
it's
Moon Age
too
Daydream.
too similar a little bit.
Right,
Like
it's still too laid back.
yeah. Um Now if I were to guess, unless maybe I missed it when you mentioned it earlier, Tony. But if I'm to guess, Suffrage City is maybe your favorite on the album.
It's hard, but it's
Yeah,
up there. It's
50%.
up there. For me, it's really like Suffragette City and Star. Um, Hang on to yourself. I really like the rock tracks on this album. I'm not gonna lie.
What and you
Um,
and you know what, Tony? I think maybe the reason why you thought I would like Starman the best and Ziggy Stardust the best is because they're not the fast rock tracks. But I actually agree with you. Some of my favorites are the faster rock ones, and this is maybe in my top three on the album.
oh, okay. And I think why the rock songs really stand out on this album is they're still well written songs.
Hmm.
You know, the lyrics still, hold up with the other songs, the structures, and even on a song like Star, where like sure, it's just, kind of a simple chord progression, the dynamics of it, the start and stopping, those really, make, it's a game changer. The kind of like the backup vocals on Suffragette City, the way they're done is cool. And all the lead guitars on this record, whenever they come in, they're great.
Hmm.
I like this song. I guess I'm a simple person because I like this song just for the Haymans. I don't know what about
Yeah,
them, but like
it's
they
catchy.
to yeah, they're so damn catchy. Like
Mhm.
they just it instantly hooked me into the song, especially because and okay, I like Tony know very little about Lou Reed and the Velvet
Mhm.
Underground.
Yep.
I mean,
Another blind spot.
yeah, another blind spot. Now Lou Reed did do a collab once with the Killers, and that's where I first heard of Lou Reed.
Oh,
But
nice.
um, the Hey Man part,
Hmm.
again, not knowing Velvet Underground and Lou Reed, that felt very much like them. Like
Yeah, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
it's like the tone of the way those Hey Mans are like sung. They're almost
Yeah.
not even sung. That's all. I don't know. It's like almost like it. It's said in a way that sounds like low energy, which
Yep.
is even though the song is the opposite. It's very high energy. I feel like the lyrics of the song is like being drained of your energy.
I could
If
see that.
that makes sense. Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of things I liked about the song, but like the Hey Mans for some reason just really and again, I felt like this was a different type of, especially in the verses for Bowie. He's singing it, he's honing in on a different type of performance than he
Yep.
would on the song like Moon Age Daydream or Starman. And I really like the way he sung the verses on Suffrage City. I also know I'm probably saying that word wrong, but
No, suffragette is correct.
I had to go to a speech school when I was
Hmm.
young, so don't bully me online.
No, no, it's fine.
Yeah, the vocal performance on this song is definitely like because he sings it and like it's hard because I don't know that much Bowie and clearly he does sing as a character quite often. I guess I don't know how close this is to his normal singing, but I really like how he sings this song. And for me, it's mostly the chorus hook, the "Don't lean on me, man, because you can't afford the ticket."
Hmm.
Like he just sounds awesome like that.
It does.
You know, I don't think you would really call a song like a rock anthem necessarily, but it hooks me in like one. Like I'm on this ride with him.
Oh yeah, like this may have been the first Bowie song I heard because like my dad's band used to cover it. So this is like
Oh,
well over 10 years ago. So it's always had like a special place for me. And just like to go back, just to bounce off what Rico said about Velvet Underground, from what I read, it was like the sound of Little Richard's piano playing with the Velvet Underground, and they were a huge influence on Bowie. So I know one of the lines, "There's only room for one, and here she comes." Probably a reference to Velvet Underground song "Here She Comes," which I think was on their first album. And I guess also Lou Reed might have been an influence on the Ziggy character as well. So it all comes together.
Yeah, this song is, and I think another reason I love the song is because of the placement on the album. Like,
Yeah, I also found that um interesting too, how it's another song with a monster riff coming out of the previous song's fade, like Moon Age Daydream did with the fade on Soul Love.
Yeah, and it's something I know I've told Tony before, probably on the podcast, that I prefer my album closers to be more on the upbeat side, a little bit more energetic, kind of going out with a bang. But
Oh yeah, I remember you mentioning that before.
yeah, but on the occasion where an album ends on a softer note, and I don't think Rock and Roll Suicide is on the softer note, but I do love when a band places a very energetic song as as the penultimate track, like
Oh,
if
for
you're
sure.
if you're gonna take a different route with the closer, like don't give me um I like Lightning Bolt Pearl Jam. Like don't give me Sleeping by Myself and then like Future Days in the album. Like I don't want to end an album like that. And that's not even a slide on either of the songs, but I don't want an album to close with like two slow songs, right? So
Right.
and because Rock and Roll Suicide does it's one of those building songs, kind of like 5 years.
Hmm.
Um, I enjoy that Surfer City is like, the last like really straightforward head of rock song because it is a pretty straightforward song, even though it does have its cool production moments like the fake out ending and
Yep.
um, I like again that funny line you mentioned earlier, the
Oh,
wham bam,
wham
thank you,
bam, thank
ma'am.
you, ma'am. Yep.
Yeah.
And that
Um,
guitar tone is just so good. And again, it goes back to like Mick Ronson's importance to Bowie's music at this time, because that you could see like how that guitar tone became, and even the playing became the blueprint for hard rock and punk rock after this.
Right. And like that keyword sound near the end too is pretty gnarly.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and I'm with Rico too. Like, if you're gonna end the album with a song that's at least starts off slow or is kind of dynamic in that way, I like a snappy song before it. You're a Soundgarden fan, so I know down the upside, you have like the fast, unkind, and then you have the super atmospheric boot camp, and so it's like, I don't know, it's like you get all that energy out, you get that final build up, and
Right.
then you get the emotional release.
Hmm. No, I get it. And also like a line that um occurred to me in this song, just because I saw it last week, was the "Hey man, Droogie don't crash here," which is obviously a reference to Clockwork Orange, which is another
oh yeah, I wrote that.
major influence on Bowie. Like, I think the book and the movie itself.
I didn't even know it was a book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote that on my notes. I've never seen the movie nor read the book, but I did when I was doing my research. I did write that the song was it seemed like heavily influenced by both Velvet Underground and A Clockwork Orange.
Hmm. I just
Um,
so like found the title interesting, Suffragette City, because I don't know if it's could be looked at as Ziggy's role in the feminist movement and sexual revolution, just because we know like the suffragettes were the women who advocated for voting rights in the early 20th century. So I don't know if there's like any of that being played into it. Because again, you could say like Bowie was a influence probably on the gay rights movement, and even maybe like the feminist movement as well, because you can see his influence on someone like Lady Gaga, and like especially when she first became huge, and like all the outfits that she was wearing, you could like easily trace that back to Bowie and even Elton John as well.
yeah, like the meat dress she wore.
Yeah.
And what I am curious now that we're getting to the final track of the album, Rock and
Hmm.
Roll Suicide. I'm curious, Tony, because he mentioned that Star, which is almost the beginning of side two. Lady Stardust secondly is the beginning, but
Hmm.
like Tony mentioned, like that's where the album really picked up for him. I'm curious if this song is a part of that, and if this is also one of his favorites, or if you felt differently about the song because it does musically definitely is somewhat a departure from the previous four songs.
I'm kind of torn a little bit. This definitely I would not say is one of my least favorites, but it's also hard for me to say it's one of my favorites. Kind of based off your guys' kind of foreshadowing earlier, it makes it seem that you guys really like this song. And I will say I did have some high hopes because Scott Weiland, a huge Bowie fan, definitely has imitated him throughout his career. They have a
Yeah.
song, STP has a song called Pops Love Suicide. And
Hmm.
so I don't know if it's kind of a play off that or not.
Could
But
be.
when the song starts, I'm not necessarily hooked. You know, the lyrics and the performance is kind of interesting. Talking about cigarette and everything.
Hmm.
But oh boy, does this song build.
Oh yeah.
Um, and what I like too is that I feel like it could have been really easy to kind of mirror the building on 5 years, but it
Hmm.
actually kind of doesn't though. 5 years is more of a slow burn, a gradual widening, where like
Yeah.
I feel like rock and roll suicide, you're like, oh, okay, here's this guitar. Oh, here's like this, this kind of like 60s little like walk up riff thing. And,
Hmm.
you know, and as much as I thought Bowie yelling 5 years would have been great to end the album with, I think him yelling "You're not alone" is even better to end the
Right.
album with.
Give me your hands. Give me your hands.
Right. So even though, like, as a song, yeah, I definitely prefer 5 years, and I would probably even prefer a kind of a song with less depth, maybe like Suffragette City, which is not a slam.
Mhm.
But I do think, looking at it as a whole album, as a concept, I really do like Rock and Roll Suicide and what it offers at the end of the album.
Right. It's just interesting how this song is him dying, even though on the title track it ends with him having been dead already. So I always found that
Hmm.
interesting as well.
I didn't even catch that, honestly.
Well, like you mentioned, just having it end with him saying, "Give me your hands," to have him die at the hands of his fans is just operatic and like not operatic, but it has an opera influence to it, but just a dramatic way to end the album, which I he knew how to close an album. To have to have that to have this song close the album is fine by me.
Now, I'm a little surprised Tony, that you said like when you first heard like the intro of the song, you weren't pulled in because I was, and maybe that's only because it's such a contrast to the last four songs where you start off with the him playing the acoustic guitar, which I know like he did on the maybe more of the early songs on the album, like Soul Love, but like I found it to be kind of like a palate cleanser a little bit. Where on a like on any other album where I might be a little annoyed, like, okay, we're ending on a slower acoustic guitar song. But I definitely liked how the song built over time. I like the kind of tremolo-y guitar that enters in, I think maybe in the second verse.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then maybe the most interesting thing I found out about the song musically is that there's a part where I swore that like there was horns being brought in, but it was actually a synth, I believe. I think I read
Oh yeah.
it was a synth.
Hmm.
And that was like surprising to me because I, this album feels like a classic rock album, and there are some pianos throughout some of the songs, but like, yeah, bringing in that synth that you know and I think too the synth is on Suffrage City as well, where I also thought it was like horn. So the production I think really shines on these last couple songs, and I think my favorite part of the song is where I feel like the song kind of comes to its climax, where he sings "Oh no, love, you're not alone."
Yes.
Like that to me, like that almost hits harder to me than like let's say the chorus of Starman. Like it's and that was like maybe the first part, and I heard it maybe on the first listen, but definitely the second and third listen I was like, okay, I was being way too critical of his vocals before, because like on this song and on that specific line in the bridge I'm like, it works so well, and he's so passionate singing it that it's super believable.
Hmm.
And you know, and it's like on a line like that where the performance transcends just the Ziggy character. Like it sounds like he's singing it as David Bowie, if that makes sense. Like
No, it does.
the song felt for sure if it was like, the death of his character and whatnot,
Hmm.
but like it also felt like he was giving his own insight from himself. And I think in an album like this, like he has opinions on things like stardom and whatnot, but like I like hearing his actual opinions, not through said character, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
and they just
that's
all. Sorry, go
yeah.
ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, and that's what I'm very. We'll get to this, I'm sure, here at the end, but like I'm very curious to like, and I know you're gonna, probably give us our next David Bowie album, but I'm curious to hear an album where it's not he's singing lyrics not through a character, even though a lot of songwriters sing through characters, even if it's not in a concept album form, you know.
Yeah, you just gotta like take on the character of the song, whether again it's a concept album or not. Just gotta convey. That's how you convey those emotions.
And I still think this song is the proper ending to this album, even though I know Tony and I both think that 5 years could have also been a closer.
Oh, this one just
Yeah.
worked, and it
Five
was
years maybe could be a cool concert closer, but for sure this fit the album better.
yeah. And I think he ended like the shows too on the tour with this song, and at the last show, he says, "This is the last show we'll ever do," and then they go into rock and roll suicide.
And I read too, is it true that like only Mick Ronson knew prior to Bowie saying that this was going to be the end of the band?
Probably. I know. I think the drummer or bassist said it was like surprised when he said it.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. But that's kind of I something that I'm appreciating from Bowie. And Tony, maybe you can talk about things that you're appreciating now from him after having heard this album. Is that like he truly was an artist in every concept, whether it was songwriting. Oh, like one thing that I wanted to mention is like when I was doing research on the album, like because you said like a lot of these songs came from the sessions for the previous album, right?
Yeah, because he wrote like 2 or 3 dozen songs around the hunky dory time, so a good number of these were left over from that.
Yeah, and I read somewhere that like during some of the first iterations of some of these songs, like when I went back to record some of these songs later, like I think the solo for Moon Age Daydream, like Mick Ronson couldn't remember the exact solo he played, and David Bowie would hum him the part, like because he remembered it, and
Oh God, I forgot. I read that too. I forgot what song it was, but yeah.
I thought that was so impressive because it's like and I don't know, maybe later on other albums David Bowie would play more lead, but on this album definitely he played the acoustic guitar and stuff, but like that to me just shows you that like he is like a true professional, that like he's really thinking about everything all the time. Like he was thinking about the direction of like the artwork and the characters and the themes, and but also too in the music, like the fact that he's like you know playing sax on some of the songs, and humming back what the guitar solo should be. Like that to me, that's impressive. And I don't think I knew the level of some of the things he did for his songs and albums before hearing this album.
Right.
I think that's really well said. Um, yeah, definitely something that I appreciated was just his skill. Whether it's performing, like now I know he did the sax, he did all the acoustic guitar. Like I'm like, okay, wow, this dude actually, in every way, quite like how you said, Chris, he's an artist in every way. It becomes quite apparent, after listening to this album and diving into it, and you know, hearing the influences that he has brought to other people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think Rico really nailed it on the head there. I can't think of too much to add, onto that. And I will say, I think the most impressive part is the conviction of everything. All these songs are very convincing. Like he's into the performance, and each song you can look at it like each song is its own little tale, and
Yep.
together it creates a bigger tale. So the fact that he was able to have that vision, even if maybe he didn't realize it at first, saying the songs loosely were a concept, but then kind of working it together. I think that's great. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I think I heard
really
some.
impressed.
Mm-hmm.
One thing a segment Tony and I used to do on the podcast, but we haven't recently because we've just forgotten, is after we do an album for album episode, we'd ask the other one if they liked this album enough, if they would go buy it on vinyl. And I definitely would buy this on vinyl because I do think this album is very unique than probably almost any other album I have on my shelf right now. Like
Yep.
just the rock opera part alone, but like I don't know, just the overall, like Tony said, like I think why this album works so well for me is like he said that there's every song really works on its own and it could be its own separate thing, and a lot of them were like, you hear Starman on the radio or on commercials and your mind doesn't instantly go to the character Ziggy Stardust. It goes to whatever the song is featured in, whether it's a Buzz Lightyear movie or Perfume, I guess. But like then you listen to the album front to back, which really is what vinyl is meant for, and it's like,
Mhm.
wow, this is its own different piece of art.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, I would get this on vinyl. I don't know about you, Tony.
I would too. And what I do like about this album, especially before I read a bit on Wikipedia about the details of it, is this also works pretty good as like a good kind of in the background album as well. Like when I was at work and stuff, there's the rock songs to get you hype. There's the slower melodic moments that are maybe a little catchier. There's enough variety, enough cohesion. So I mean, I like that you can enjoy it beyond just the concept.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was just like anytime I like listened to this, like there were some times where I was driving and listening to this, and it worked
Hmm.
great. It worked great when I listened to it at night or when I listened to it like in the middle of the day where it's super sunny outside. Like, and those things might seem small. Like those things don't ever matter when people go to review music. But as someone listening to music, those I don't know. I always I count for those type of things. Like, how well does this album? Because like, yeah, the album is if the album like some people are gonna probably hate me for this, but like when I think of rock opera, there's so many bad ways you can go about it. Like I don't know, maybe Bowie was responsible for Green Day's American Idiot. I don't know. Um, but like it can be like overdone and sound corny, but it never felt like that to me. Like Tony said, sometimes it worked great. Like you could just listen to Ziggy Stardust, the song, or Moon Age Daydream in the background, and it's just like great music. Like I said, Ziggy Stardust has like a you put it on outside when like you're barbecuing for some reason for me, like just the music. But then like
Hmm.
lyrically, it's not that. Like it's not like a necessarily. And it is kind of a party song in the sense that like Ziggy was partying too much,
Yep.
but like I don't know, like it works well in a lot of different environments, I think, which is again something that I appreciated from this album. So to me, the question is, well, first, Chris, I wanted to ask you, because I don't know if you said it or not, is this your favorite Bowie album?
No.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
Wow.
Even though you do
Based off
agree,
your
even though you
admiration
agree
for it.
that this is the first one you would give to a non-Bowie fan.
Absolutely. Perfect starting place for it.
So you don't have to if you don't want to tell me what your favorite is now. But another question, similar question is, where would you take us next? Because I do think I like this album enough to where I want to continue on. Because this album, part of me was like, oh, when I'm done listening to this album, I might appreciate Bowie more for who he was and his
Hmm.
contribution to music. But I'm like, maybe it's just not going to be my style where I go back and listen to it.
Right.
Like, but that's not the case. Like, I'm actually way more curious now what his other albums sound like from hearing this one. So I'm curious what avenue you're going to bring us down next when
All
it
right.
comes to Bowie.
Well, your first question's a lot easier to answer to. My favorite is Station to Station, which came out a few years later in 1976. And I anticipated you asking this question about where to go to next. And I've been like thinking about it and like struggling to figure out like what would I do or like what would I recommend? It's like, do I just have you go to the beginning or knowing that you're a big U2 fan, do I have you go a few years later down to one of the Berlin trilogy albums, which it's like after basically like I don't want to like take it too long, but after Ziggy Stardust, you know, Bowie's year basically of 1972 was, the album was released. Toward the album, he co-produced Lou Reed's breakthrough second solo album, Transformer, with Mick Ronson, which is another glam rock staple. I think one that you guys would probably like. It also has like some of Lou's like best songs and most popular songs. So he did the Transformer album. He wrote All the Young Dudes and produced that Mata Hoople out album of the same name. He produced the Stooges' third album, Raw Power, in September and October, which was then released in February 1973. And he became friends with Iggy Pop at that time. So it's like, with all that activity, no wonder why he developed a cocaine addiction. And he had a bad cocaine addiction like in the 70s. So where was I saying? Oh yeah, so after this he did Aladdin Sane, which he says like Ziggy Goes to America. That was the last album with the Spiders from Mars, and then he had the Diamond Dogs album after that, which was like a transition album from glam rock to it started as like a stage show idea, like either like a theater show or a film, which he wanted to do based on 1984 book, but George Orwell's estate wouldn't let him. So you had those, and then he still like when he's living in LA around this time, and he grew to hate LA for what it was. Part of it was the cocaine addiction. 1975, he did Young Americans album, which is more soul based. He recorded in either New York or Philadelphia, and that's where he met Carlos Alomar, who would become a major, basically like his next collaborate, like his next Mick Ronson, I'll say, in terms of the importance of his influence on the of his music in the 70s. So he ended up going to Berlin and like moving back to Europe to get rid of the cocaine addiction and to get clean. So there, but yeah, Station Station, he doesn't remember recording at all. That's how bad his addiction was. And it's a great album. And that's like the transition to Berlin trilogy, which found Bowie with Carlos Alomar, George Murray, I believe, on bass, Dennis Davis, Tony Visconti, who was in his earlier groups and like produced his earlier work, David Bowie album, which had Space Oddity on it, and The Man Who Sold the World, and also Brian Eno, which a lot of people associate the Berlin trilogy with. So like I said, I didn't want to make it a long explanation, but basically, if I was to give you an album, it'd be probably Heroes from it's the second album in that trilogy. So knowing that you're a huge U2 fan and love Octung Baby, and as you know from Bono's book, he did say that they went to Berlin to, start over at the fall of Berlin Wall, and they went to Hansa Studios, which is where Bowie had recorded Low, the first album in the trilogy, in parts of Heroes as well at Hansa Studios, which used to be I think a Nazi building. It had like a big ballroom.
Yeah, and I'm glad you explained the YouTube connection because Tony, we did the Octane Baby episode with Tony here on the podcast,
Yep.
and I knew he would appreciate that connection as well. Especially because Tony said that album's grown on him over the months since he first heard it.
Oh, that's
100%.
Good. So I guess if you want to get into like that frame of mind of what you two were aiming for Octung Baby, it would probably be something from that Berlin trilogy. So probably Heroes, which I consider his like best album.
So it's very interesting because you have what you consider his best, and then you have your favorite, and then you have what people's first Bowie album should be.
Yeah. Again, it's like tough to like just because he was basically music's chameleon. So like his output, it's like his entire catalog to me is like the most fulfilling I've ever heard. But the 70s output is just legendary, where he had gained that reputation of constant evolution of constant musical evolution. So once he got shed the glam rock, like after that was just like you didn't know what to expect.
Well, I think that will be a perfect um, segue into our next Bowie episode because, well, I'm speaking for Tony and myself, but I think we both definitely want to do another Bowie album on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even if we didn't have the podcast, we'd want to do another Bowie album. But yeah, I definitely think later this year we will probably, um, we'll let you finalize your decision, and then we'll come back with our next Bowie album. Um, you know, but I definitely am grateful that you're able to do this episode with us because I think if Tony and I did this on our own,
Mm-hmm.
we would be missing out on a lot of the rich, history and details with the album and the influences and everything like that. And I think we would have still enjoyed the album, but maybe not nearly as much.
Yeah, not on the same level. Like as we're wrapping up this podcast, I definitely am coming out with a greater understanding and appreciation for the album.
Oh, well, I'm excited to hear that.
Yeah, I
And
know. Like I said,
also,
oh,
uh,
yeah.
good news, I figured out what 90s riff I was thinking about for the song Ziggy Stardust. Semi Charmed Life from Third Eye Blind, released in 97. I mean, totally sounds different, but it's like the same progression. So I'm
Well,
not going crazy.
well, I was thinking when you said 90s, I didn't agree with you initially, but then like um the Counting Crows, they have like a covers album where they do a lot of like older cover songs. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, okay, I could see them doing the song. They don't, but I'm like, I could see them covering the song. So I kind of got where you're going with that take.
Oh, cool. But
Um,
yeah, if you guys are definitely interested in learning more about him, I would, if you have HBO Max, definitely check out the documentary Moon Age Daydream that came out last year by Brett Morgan. It was
oh
like
yeah.
it's the first like um documentary that's like sanctioned by his estate. So they gave him free reign and total creative control input into it. And I guess he had started talking about it with Bowie before he died. So he had like access to his archives and everything. So that's definitely an a movie to, you know, it's not even like a movie, it's just an experience, is how I describe it. So if you watch it, listen to the volume loud and just enjoy it.
Well, that might even have to be a future episode. We've yet to really do any episodes on like a documentary or movie of any kind, but
A different form of media.
yeah, that would be fun. So we'll keep that in mind, and like I said, we'll probably I would assume sometime later this year definitely be doing another Bowie album. But thank you again, Chris, for being on the podcast and for accompanying Tony and I on our first trip to Bowie.
I am very honored to have done this and I loved it all.
All right. Well, I think that'll wrap up this episode. Um, Next week, Tony and I are hopefully we're going to be joined by another guest, another mutual friend. Um, if not next week, it'll probably be the following week. But and then we have, I believe, a game episode we're planning for the end of this month, and Tony and I are also going to tackle another album that neither of us had heard before. So we got a lot of cool episodes coming up for the rest of this month. But until then, I hope everyone takes care, and you'll be hearing from us soon. Bye bye.
Excellent. Bye. Thank you.